This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Good morning. I mean, we do this occasionally, don't we? It washes by you. Washes over you? Does it wash by you or wash over you? I don't know. And then occasionally something happens and you just sort of sit back and marvel at the madness of it all. There's a story today in the Financial Times. Jim Pickard has picked up on the case of the curious cousin. Do you remember? That's rather good. That's very Agatha Christie. The case of the curious cousin. Do you remember Boris Johnson's cousin, distant cousin, who popped up and offered to guarantee an £800,000 loan after being introduced to him by the bloke who he then put forward to become chairman of the BBC? Turns out the cousin got lined up potentially for some sort of plum job as well. And you sort of see these stories. Obviously, if you're me, you think, oh, God, that's another one that I didn't get into the book. But the normal people, it's just not normal. This isn't normal. And that's the British equivalent, which still, thankfully, is a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Anodyne, a little less serious than the American equivalent. But the American equivalent is absolutely bonkers now. So Donald Trump, just off the top of my head, right, is a convicted sex offender. He has been heard boasting on tape about official secrets that he stole from the White House. He has been heard on tape trying to steal the last election by pressuring politicians and officials in Georgia to find him votes that hadn't been cast. The evidence is absolutely irrefutable. The vagaries of the law and court cases in the American legal system mean that convictions are by no means guaranteed. Just we have to be careful what you say at this point. But one can think of a few instances from American legal history that rather challenge naive presumptions. But it is truly breathtaking, and yet here we are. It's quite incredible. So this mugshot appears overnight, and immediately Donald Trump is selling T-shirts with it on. And it's the point about the evidence, isn't it? And listen, if you're sitting there thinking, oh, Hunter Biden's laptop or something like that, then, in many ways, you're listening to the right radio show, but for the wrong reasons. Because the idea of any equivalence or balance or, yeah, but in this kind of scenario is absolutely crackers. Truly, truly crackers. And yet here we are again, with him way ahead in the polls. I think beating Biden in some opinion polls. And conscious of the fact that his best chance of avoiding jail is probably becoming president so that he can pardon himself, although that applies only to federal crimes. And I think the crimes in Georgia that he's accused of would not be subject to a presidential pardon. There was once a fella, I think in the 30s, who campaigned to be president of the United States from a jail cell. And how far back do you have to go for an absolute cold shower of normality? It's only Barack Obama. That's it. You just go back to that. Now, he wasn't the Messiah, but neither was he a very naughty boy. That was it, you know. It was normal. What was that, 2015? 2016? Just whether you like progressive politics or not, whether you're a bit racist or not, it was still just normal. And now here we are, looking at a president who's been indicted 4 times. Oh, we haven't even mentioned paying off a pornographic actress, an offence for which his own lawyer has already gone to jail. It is absolutely bonkers. And some mornings I sit here and think, how do we get back into this subject? Thankfully, since his coup attempt failed, and even, yesterday giving an interview so Tucker Carlson, this bloke who used to be on Fox News, when the Dominion case went to court, I don't know if you know this, they got hold of all the emails that were being exchanged within Rupert Murdoch's empire at the time of the coup attempt and shortly after, in the run-up to it. And Tucker Carlson is writing at length about how much he hates Donald Trump and how disgusting he is and how relieved he is that he's finally going to be gone. And yet so corrupt is this ecosystem that they're now of use to each other again. So straight to the front of the queue. But I mean, truly, truly bizarre. You almost can't talk about it because you begin to think that you're the one that's gone mad. Well, I can't be saying accurate. I can't be describing reality, can I? This can't actually be happening. And then, as I just said a moment ago, you see it's everywhere. And it's like something at a Doctor Who now in this studio because we've got all the live news channels on, and for some reason they've all just put up the mugshot. Just, it just sort of flashed up in front. Oh, thank goodness for that. The BBC's doing something about Ofgem. That was quite spooky. That was like a sort of Doctor Who moment where sort of the walls start closing in, and it's this big orange face closing in like the rubbish dump in the first Star Wars film. The walls are save me. And I suddenly thought back. I think it was January 2016, wasn't it? It was January 2016. And it was described at the time as a joke, but for some reason it resonated beyond the usual bilge that he was burbling about, didn't it? You'd seen the nastiness by then. You'd seen the absolute depravity, the complete absence of anything that remotely resembled morality or a compass. But you probably hadn't fully appreciated the contagion. You hadn't appreciated the contagion and his understanding of the worst of the worst. It's such a bleak worldview to think that you can do disgusting things and still be cheered to the rafters. It's such I think if I had to determine or describe what is most disgusting about Trump and, of course, to a lesser extent, Johnson, it's their knowledge that they can do disgusting things and retain the affection of lots of people. You know, if Johnson had got into the race when Truss resigned, he probably would have won. The Conservative membership probably would have carried him back into Downing Street, and he would have been there when the Privileges Committee report dropped and he got recalled from his own constituency. Incredible, really, but thankfully a sort of watered-down version of what's happening in America, but precisely the same problem of personality cults, corruption on an epic scale, all stemming from one depraved individual. A system cannot cope with somebody so utterly devoid of morality, so utterly devoid of ethics. Not just devoid, because that speaks of a vacuum or an emptiness. What's the opposite? Well, I suppose depravity is the word that I keep using because it seems to me to be the antonym of morality. And it's their knowledge that they could do it. That's the thing that I find most amazing and most dispiriting because it changes the way that decent people or half-decent people or ordinary people, it changes the way that we look at the world. You know, you know, obviously that we've had Hitlers and we've had Stalins and they can retain the support and the popularity of a population. But you always think of it as in the history books, or well, it can only happen if you're like Kim Jong-un and you've managed to completely deprive the population of information. You've managed to completely control the flow of truth. But then you look at it in your own country. If Boris Johnson launched a coup attempt, do you think that Nadine Dorries and Jacob Rees-Mogg would be alongside him or standing up for democracy, society and decency? I'll leave that question hanging. But you sort of realise how fragile stability is. It's so fragile that one depraved human can come along with contempt for what binds society together, with absolute contempt for what pass for values, and he can threaten the stability of an entire society. But what I don't get is how he knew back in January of 2016, how did he know that he really could do whatever the hell he wanted without losing a single vote? How did he know that? The people that had already decided that they backed him then, and we're talking January 2016, how did Donald Trump know that he could pick their pockets, assault their mum, and steal their votes? How did he know he could do all of those things and not lose their support. So just have a little listen to this.
My people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
I mean, we've talked about Doctor Who already, but that is the Hollywood, that's the narrative arc, isn't it? That's the point in the film where the music changes, I think. Or the voiceover goes, he was right. Because it's so implausible. What did you think at the time when you first heard that? I'll play it again in a minute. I'll play it again in a second. Because that is insane. How did he know that in January 2016? How did he know that? You know, his commercial career was, impressive in some ways, although all sorts of question marks hang over legality, taxation and tactics. He presented an image on The Apprentice, but I can't imagine Alan Sugar being able to do all of the things that Donald Trump has done without losing the support of a single voter. And it's that base there, isn't it? How did he know? Maybe he didn't. Maybe it was a throwaway line that has come true. But my God, talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's absolutely breathtaking. I wonder whether a script editor would actually send it back and say, nah, you can't say it. No, you can't say that. Don't be daft. I can't say you can't shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single. But he could. What would they claim? That it was a hoax? That it was, Alex Jones, his big supporter, Nigel Farage's mate. He claimed that the Sandy Hook school massacre was a hoax, didn't he? And people believed him to the tune of millions and millions and millions of pounds that he made in profit from these people, the same people that supported Donald Trump. What is it that they understand about their victims, their marks, their voters, their supporters, whatever you want to call them, that is so utterly elusive to the rest of us? Well, I hope it's not completely elusive because we're about to do a phone-in on it, but it's incredible, right? So, this is prompted by the mugshot, which obviously I can't do on the radio. But if you haven't seen it, excellent coverage as ever over at lbc.co.uk. It's a bizarre picture, but it's one that he's already boasting about, already using as propaganda. I don't know that it will move a single needle. I think if you've already swallowed the Kool-Aid, then you'll think that it helps Trump. And if you are living in the real world, you'll think that it doesn't. It's that simple. It's an alternative reality that he has offered to people, a completely bogus reality in which he won the election and he didn't start a coup and he didn't steal documents and he didn't try and rig the votes in Georgia and he didn't pay off a pornographic house. It's completely ridiculous. What do his supporters even do on that? Do they just not care, or do they believe the lies, or have they switched something off? Or was it never switched on? And how did he know? How did he know that he could do absolutely anything without losing the support of people that you might have lived next door to, or people that you might have gone to school with, or people that you might have sat next to at work? People who are not aliens. How did he know? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. How the hell, I'm going to play it one more time and then I'll say, how the hell did he know?
My people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
It is incredible. I can agree with him on something. But how did he know? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 10 is the time. He knew in 2016 that he could do whatever he wanted. He didn't say, I'll be stealing official secrets or stealing votes or paying off pornographic actors or stealing official secrets and lying about all of it. He used an analogy of shooting someone on Fifth Avenue, but he knew he could do all of these things without losing it. How did he know that he could do all of these things, do anything at all without losing a single vote? Frederick's in Thamesmead to kick things off. Frederick, how did he know?
Hey, James, this is Cedric in Thamesmead. It's been a while.
Hello.
this all started before 2016. If you remember, Newt Gingrich was head of the Republican Party, and he's changed that whole messaging around, where he was encouraging people to get upset about, this is why this is happening to you, whatever. And Trump picked up on that. And, he was a Democrat initially. If you remember, he supported Kamala Harris. But he picked up on that, and Trump...
Was it Gingrich or Sarah Palin who moved first into that territory, that Tea Party territory, which I think you're describing?
Well, I think this was before Sarah Palin, because Newt Gingrich, if you remember, he was the head of the Republican Party at one time.
Leader of the House Republican Conference.
Yes, and when he came in, he's the one that started changing their messaging, and which has, then the Republicans said, oh, look, we're gaining power, and they just kept and that's why they still do it to this day.
Yeah, but I get that. But what I don't understand is that when these balloons burst, they carry on holding them and thinking that they're still inflated. That it's not so much the tactics today that I'm examining; it's the impunity. It's his knowledge, because Newt Gingrich wouldn't have thought he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it.
No, but you have to. But see, Trump is like a psychopath, and they can be quite clever at manipulation. He's like a snake oil salesman, and so in my opinion, he's probably created. Someone would have to confirm this. One of the world's largest cults in the country.
But snake oil salesmen get run out of town. I've read my Mark Twain. They get tarred and feathered when their scam is unveiled. When their scam is discovered, they get lynched.
He keeps selling them the oil. He just keeps selling them, and they fall for it. And once they become a member of the cult, then he can just do and say whatever he wants, and they believe it. They no longer use common sense.
Well, that's the amazing thing. I think we're still looking at the how does he get their support in the first place element of the conversation, rather than how does he retain it after. It's as if at the end of an episode of Scooby-Doo, they take the mask off, and it's it's the owner of the amusement park, and instead of carting him off to jail, all of the townspeople put him back in charge of the amusement park. But
he keeps tapping into that anger that they have of why am I in the situation, and he just keeps tapping into that and keep feeding it, and eventually they're radicalized, and then.
And then that's it. Then he can literally do whatever he wants. He can stand up in public and say black is white, up is down. I won the election, and they will go with him. I'd say it's breathtaking. Thank you, Cedric. It's 23 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I must rein in my impatience because I haven't got a clue. So the idea of how he can hang on to it. How did he know? That's the bit I don't get. The bit I don't get, how did he know that he could retain the support of these people, whatever he did, however disgusting his behaviour, however corrupt his conduct? How did he know that he wouldn't lose a single vote? So, we'll go to Philip next in Stanmore. Philip, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. First time speaking to you.
Welcome aboard.
It's a great pleasure. So I'm a photographer, and I've got two instances where I've met and photographed the Trumps.
Okay.
And I want to try and see if I can get to your question and give you some answer on that. But just to give you the background on the two instances, the first time was back in the mid-90s, and I photographed Ivana Trump's engagement party to Ricardo at Sion House.
Right.
This is back when the Duke of Northumberland was still there and partying and very much part of the scene. And it was a very memorable engagement party. I was one of the official photographers. And something quite amusing happened there. I can tell you the funny thing that happened, because it does link with what happened later. And I didn't have to sign any NDAs or anything. So basically, it was a fun evening, lots of very famous people there, obviously. And I was sat down, ready to photograph the speeches, and Shirley Bassey, impromptu, just leapt into some great song. It might have been Diamonds Are Forever. And it was just this bizarre moment of me being crouched down at the feet of Shirley Bassey as she belted out, I think it was Diamonds Are Forever, and the sort of room-stopping, memorable moment. And that just always stayed with me. Now, a few years ago, I was then at another function, and Ivanka and Jared Kushner were there.
Right.
I'm
not sure the Shirley Bassey story has helped me to a better understanding of Trump's diabolical genius, Philip.
I'm going to hopefully get there. I know that you're pushing me to hurry up. Basically, meeting Ivanka and Jared, and I wanted to mention to Ivanka that I photographed Ivana's engagement party, and I thought I would kick off with the story about Shirley Bassey and break the ice.
Yes.
Now, to get to your question, despite my feelings about Donald Trump and so forth, and what he stands for and everything he's done, the moment I was in the company of Ivanka and Jared Kushner, there was for sure a feeling where I was slightly under a spell. Now, I've met and photographed many, many famous people.
Really?
And I don't get like that. It's very rare, and I'm certainly not going to start swooning.
No.
But in the moment that I was standing with them and chatting to them, I did for that brief moment forget about Trump and everything that, as I said, he represents and he's done. Now, there is that star quality element. And I imagine for many people in America who would never get close to someone like that, Donald Trump, he's put on a pedestal. He's seen as a god. He's a figure to be admired and worshipped by those people. And there is that element of sort of greatness that they would look up to him.
I understand all that, but it's staying on the pedestal. It'd be like if Jimmy Savile was still popular among the British public.
Because they don't have the ability to do what you do, and hopefully many listeners, and that is basically have critical thinking and look between the lines and see things from different sides.
I guess politics and showbiz are different, although he blurs the line. You have enormous falls from grace in America. You have,
sure.
And go right back to Fatty Arbuckle. You don't retain your popularity after the scandal has broken in the way that he does.
They don't have the intelligence, the critical thinking, the wherewithal to be able to sort of turn it around.
No, I wish it were that simple. But these are not stupid people. Some of them will be, but there are loads of people who aren't going along with it out of self-interest, like a lot of the Republican Party might be. But there are people who will be. Look, the people who join his clubs and stuff like that, they've earned a ton of money. I appreciate it's not a mark of IQ, but you can't be as thick as mince if you're making millions of pounds. There's something else there. I don't know what it makes me believe in the Dr. Faust story, Philip, is what it does. It makes me believe you can sell your soul to the devil in return for earthly rewards, and that he got himself a full ticket.
But I think the base is so, as you quite rightly said, the people that are not so bright is so huge.
I've never said that.
Massive momentum is so great that it's sort of a juggernaut that overpowers.
Maybe. I don't know that I have said. I don't think I do think that. If I have said that in the past, I mean, obviously the ease with which you can gull people is related slightly to their levels of education, if not intelligence. But this is half the country, man. So whatever percentile you go for, this is half the country. It just doesn't work, and it won't be the thickest half. There'll be blurrings and perforations and dotted lines. Thank you, Philip. Auto suggestion. Perhaps maybe I'm looking at it from the wrong angle. Scott suggests maybe he's just brilliant at auto suggestion. So he actually puts the line into people's minds. He didn't know he could get away with it, says another texter. At that point, he was setting the scene in the minds of his supporters. Mark goes down the psychopath route. Says the reason he knew is because he's a psychopath. He believes he can do anything. It's his belief that he is always right and can't be wrong. And therefore, it would be the most normal thing in the world for everybody else to think like that. That maybe, I haven't got the psychology training to comment on that. But if you truly believe that yourself, then it wouldn't be remarkable to you that your supporters believed it as well. Bob in Leeds says it was the work he did on Barack Obama's birth certificate. Never forget that's how he started gaining his base. And that, I think, was lifted straight from Fox News, wasn't it? Because Barack Obama was black, he couldn't be American, which is, National Front style rhetoric. You can't be British if you can't trace your family back to the Doomsday Book or whatever the modern equivalent of that might be. He got his playbook, I like this, from US Wrestling. He's had a lot of interaction with this community and has seen the power of the illusion and the sheer stupidity of the American people. Ed Balls did a documentary covering this link, and it all made sense. I think there is something in that, actually. But again, I reject that stupidity. It's more subtle than stupidity. It's different from stupidity. You know, we've got family friends who moved to America 30 years ago. We kind of lost touch and then got back in touch about 5 years ago, and they were massive Trump fans. Massive Donald Trump fans. It just, and I haven't checked in, but presumably still are.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. You are indeed listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention to Donald Trump once again, to mark the mugshot, really, as much as the latest indictment, this time on racketeering charges, along with, I think, 19 alleged co-conspirators. And the list is just ridiculous now. The list is absolutely ridiculous. Any one of these offences would have been enough to derail any other politician at any other point in history. I used to resist, I don't know if you remember, I used to resist the parallels with Boris Johnson, out of a sort of slightly misplaced sense of patriotism. I think, oh, well, the Americans might fall for this, but there's no way we would. It's my own little brand of English exceptionalism. It's the closest I ever get to being a Brexiter, I think, except I have faith in good things as opposed to belief in either non-existent things or bad things. But the idea that we weren't witnessing a similar collapse in standards, a similar abandonment of probity and integrity, I can't sustain that anymore. Of course we are. We have. But the support remains. That's the bit that I don't understand, you know. I'm trying to think of a parallel outside politics. It would be like people retaining a deep affection for Jimmy Savile, wouldn't it? Or claiming that... I mean, who else do we bet? That Rolf Harris had been the victim of a conspiracy theory or some sort of hoax. There will be a tiny number of people in those categories, no doubt, lurking around on Facebook somewhere. But how does Trump pull it off on the scale that he pulled it off? Tony's in Greenock. Tony, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call. I'm unable to answer your latest question. I was going back to your initial question about how he managed to get where he is. You seem to think there was some sort of plan or scheme that he had. I think he was winging it for a lot of the time and just seeing what he could get away with. And as he got away with more and more, his moves got bolder and bolder to the extent now where even being indicted and going to jail and having your mugshot taken has given him that power to say, these people don't care what I do. I can do anything.
So even though he said it in 2016, if you'd popped him in a DeLorean sports car and taken him to 2023 and showed him that he was neck and neck with the sitting president who'd already beaten him once in the polls while being indicted on 4 separate charges of absolutely egregious crimes, even he wouldn't have believed it in 2016.
Probably not, but I don't think it would have stopped him because nothing has stopped him. I said to your producer,
it's like perpetual motion. If he keeps going forward, he's dead. If he stops moving forward, he's dead. Yeah,
and it's this thing of if he had been pulled up about it, say when he made that remark to the guy about grabbing women, and somebody had pulled him up and the media had maybe a big backlash on that instead of having Fox News, supporting him. If somebody had turned around and said, that's enough, you've crossed the line, he's got the safety blanket of just going back and saying, well, okay, I tried, I failed, I'm going back to my multi-billion-pound business, I can retire to Mar-a-Lago and I don't really have to bother. But for him, I think he's like a kid with his parents. He's testing the boundaries. If you let a kid away with something, they'll test the boundaries and try again and try again. And Trump's now got to the point, with the help of the media that support him, of being able to pretty much do anything he wants. That statement comes back. He could shoot somebody and get away with it. And if he was pulled up for it, no doubt the media would blame the person who got shot for getting away with it.
I know it's not your intention, but I mean, a lot of the media has been calling him out. A lot of the media has been keeping a very close tally of his various lies and misdemeanors and crimes. But that's not media that gets close to his core support. But I mean, the numbers Fox News gets don't explain how he could be neck and neck with Joe Biden in a national poll. There's so much going on. It's silly of me to expect there to be one simple single answer. But I can't think of parallels. Maybe I don't have the history. I'm just thinking, other leaders undertaking atrocities and retaining support. If you give them the lies they want to hear and an enemy they want to hate, then you can do almost anything. in history, and it hasn't quite done that. It's I don't know. It's a shallower depravity than that, isn't it?
Yeah, but the worrying thing for me, though, James, is when will it stop? At what point will he say enough is enough?
Well, he never will.
I
don't think he ever will. No, and if he gets in for a second term, well, he won't make the same mistakes again, will he? With regard, I mean, you've seen some of the affidavits about what will we do if people don't like it. I said, well, that's what the Insurrection Act was designed for. That is literally positing the notion of putting American troops on the streets to quell protests against the corruption of a democratic election. I can't believe I'm saying these words about the United States of America in 2023. But what is even more shocking is not that we're talking about that happening in America, that conversation being conducted in the White House. That's what the Insurrection Act is for. We would send in troops to suppress protests to shoot Americans protesting against our robbery of an election. But we're talking about the guy being on the comeback trail now. That's the mad bit. Thank you, Tony. Lewis is in Putney. Lewis, what have you got?
I think you were right when you said that he gives people someone to hate. In this particular case, it was Hillary.
Yeah.
And I'm not particularly blaming her for being who she was or anything.
Sure.
I'm just saying that after 8 years of Obama, the Republican base, as it were, had been told for so long about how corrupt Obama was and how awful he was and how terrible, Obamacare was socialism. And then here was Hillary going to continue it all. And she was, the Benghazi thing, whether or not
but I don't think you can cite evidence of Hillary Clinton's fallibility in it, because, it's like comparing Diane Abbott's mojito on a train or Keir Starmer's curry in Durham to Boris Johnson arranging secret loans and promoting people who helped facilitate them to the chairmanship of the BBC. It's like comparing the illegal prorogation of Parliament to being a bit late for a bus. Hillary Clinton had, skeletons in her closet. But how can someone look at that tiny little skeleton and think it's the end of the world, and then look at the army of skeletons marching? Well, they're not even in his closet. He's wearing them as earrings, and think that that's all absolutely fine.
Because that's what they've been told. If you think about it, like the drip effect of the right-wing media for Brexit.
Yes.
Like with Hillary, do you remember years ago Top Gear did a tour of the southern states?
I may have missed that, Lewis. So you're going to have to. I hope it's as good as the Shirley Bassey anecdote we got earlier in this hour.
Well, no, but this is the thing. There was so much hatred towards Hillary Clinton.
Right.
When one of the guys wrote a pro-Hillary message on it, people literally were almost got. People almost got beaten up for the sake of the show. And it's a bit like you would say to any normal person or conservative voter, if someone lied to the Queen, they would be up in arms about it.
Yes.
But if they're doing it for the right reason, in inverted commas, for the greater good, for the country, I'm 100% certain if Donald Trump had shot that person, hypothetically, they would say, well, that person was a traitor.
Yeah, he deserved it.
Yeah, they give someone...
And how did he know that? How did he know? Is it just a lifetime of selling people toot for a lot of money, a lifetime of mugging people off and taking all that? Because taking money and taking a vote probably are quite similar processes, perhaps.
But it's a very slow process. But I think, again, like the other callers said, it's multifaceted, like all things. But I think he just saw gradually over time, especially, building up to it when he said the Muslim ban. And then people weren't, like the Republicans weren't fully against it. Like you heard the odd person say, I think that was the big changing point, because then he suddenly went to like the front runner and he thought, oh, actually, no, I can just say these racist things and ban, certain people, just because people were so worried about the Muslims being the enemy because of, the history.
Well, not knowing that I think the second biggest shareholder in Rupert Murdoch's corporation at the time was a Saudi Arabian royal. But this is our curse of trying to bring logic and facts to what is really a psychological process. And so there is nothing then. Right? There is literally nothing. The photographs could emerge of him, I don't know what, doing something with Vladimir Putin that is not suitable for describing at 10:43 on a Friday morning on a family radio program, and they would be. There is literally nothing he couldn't do, nothing at all. There's no sacred cow he could slay that would hemorrhage support. It's incredible, right?
If you look carefully, like at Republican support Putin gets quite a lot because he's religious, he's right wing, he's
authoritarian.
He does, like, in the nicest possible, without trying to, in the horrible way of saying it, he does what we'd like to do if the gloves were taken off. We don't care about human rights. We'll bomb ISIS back to the Stone Age.
You're using we to describe the kind of people that are drawn to Donald Trump rather than yourself. Of course. No, so that is it. Yeah, govern through sort of authoritarianism and hatred, and of course, if you believe that you'd be on the winning side of the abuses and the vileness and the egregious behaviour, then a certain type of person would be delighted with it, and the rest, well, they'd be the ones on the street getting shot after they deployed the Insurrection Act against American citizens. It does fit. I can see the jigsaw. Just some of the pieces are still upside down. Lewis, always a pleasure. Thank you. It's coming up to 11:15. 0345 606 0973 is the number that you need. It is bizarre, but it is probably impenetrable. These are these figures that come along once in a generation, or even more rarely, and just somehow implicitly understand how to appeal to the corrupt core of a country, and that corrupt core of a country will take you all the way to the White House, or of course to Downing Street.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:48. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We're just looking at the latest addition to the charge sheet against Donald Trump. Utterly unprecedented. I don't know what point you want to pick for our little tactic of falling into a coma and then waking up today. But you don't have to go back 10 years. If you fell into a coma 8 years ago, woke up today and had a look what had happened to American politics, you'd probably ask to be put back under, but you would not believe it. You'd think someone was yanking your chain or pulling your leg, like that film, that Rebel Wilson film where she thinks she's still in high school. Paige is in High Wycombe. Hello, Paige.
Hello, James. I want to answer your question about how he can get away with shooting somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Which listen, I'm sounding like an annoyed teacher now, but the question is actually, how did he know that he would be able to get away? But I think that's probably...
I can answer that in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, so back in 2015, the Republican primaries.
Yes.
The Republican Party, the caucus, had no interest in Trump.
No,
they didn't want Trump on the stage. They hated him. And so the caucus was all for Ted Cruz.
Yes.
But Trump had the ability to get to the people. You know, he was the billionaire businessman.
Yep.
He was the celebrity that abused other celebrities.
Yes.
And so he got, twice as many people votes as Ted Cruz. And once he won the nomination, even the people that thought he was a vile human being had to get behind him.
Yeah.
Because they needed the presidency in every other spot.
Sure.
So he had the entire Republican caucus. He had the entire, the donor society behind him. He was invincible. But you also have to remember, he didn't win the most votes in 2016. He won the Electoral College.
Sure.
And that's what he tried to recreate in 2020.
By getting the votes in the right, the votes in the right place.
Right, in Georgia.
No, but he still. I don't accommodate this quibble, because he got an for what he is, he got an epic amount of votes, and for what he is now, the support that is being demonstrated in the polling is utterly obscene.
I'm not buying the polling, but remember, Biden got more votes than Barack Obama got.
Yeah, but the population's grown as well, I think.
Well,
so
maybe.
Got to keep an eye on the percentages.
Trump doesn't have 50% of the country in no way, shape, or form.
Well,
he's got the loudest supporters.
Yeah, but he could still win.
I don't think so.
Well, I don't want him
could,
to, but you can't say it's. I mean, he's way ahead. He's nominations.
I give him a 20% shot.
Oh, yeah, well, I hope you're right. Well, I hope you're wrong. I hope it's a 1% shot, but or a 0 or a 0 or -5% shot. But it is
just to show you something. The mugshot appeared on CNN last night in a bar. And the entire bar celebrated seeing his mugshot.
That's a meme. That's a football bar. That was when England scored a goal in the last World Cup, and someone's changed.
Well, it could be.
No, it is.
Trust me.
No, trust me. My colleague James on the LBC digital side of things, heard me talking about it earlier and politely pointed out that it was a doctored image.
In New York or something?
It's a doctored image. It's a football bar. They've changed what's on the screen. The crowd is real, but the point at which they all started throwing their drinks around was not when the mugshot came up on the screen. It was when
it was probably a football game.
It was when England scored. Yes, it was when England scored a goal. But don't worry, I fell for it too. Thank goodness someone in the office was paying attention. Paige, thank you. 10:52 is the time. It's everywhere I turn. And you know, the charges that he's facing are charges designed to bring down mafia organisations, racketeering bosses. It's quite incredible. But there it is. They're still cheering him. Thank you, Paige. Always a pleasure. Rebecca is in Sudbury. Rebecca, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the kind of psychology behind it. I'd lived in the States for 16 years. I've been back for some time.
Right.
But there is an absolute love of the rebel and counterculture. And he's sort of a symbol of the sort of first rebel for the right-wingers and the racists.
Yeah.
So if you picture him shooting somebody in Times Square, if the people that support him believe that person is black or a liberal, they don't care.
They deserve
because there's a gun culture.
They
yeah,
deserve
exactly. So I just,
and not just that.
Really all I have to say.
You've got the opposite problem to me, Rebecca. But there's also it's not just giving people permission to hate. I think what I may have missed in the early days was people believing the threat that someone is going to take away something you value. So that's part of the American psyche. I don't know. They're going to take away your guns. They're going to take away your whatever it is. But Barack Obama's going to steal it, so you don't have to have a desiccated existence. You don't have to be poor or uneducated or angry if you believe the other lie, the lie that Hillary Clinton is going to steal your guns. Then.
Yeah, I really believe that is a huge...
They'll go anywhere with you. If they promise to protect your guns, they'll go anywhere with you.
Yeah.
And we don't get that in Britain.
I have friends in America who are... I mean, they're friends of my parents, but they're Republicans. They hate Trump, but they love guns.
Yeah.
And so, so there's the whole aspect. To us, it's very shocking, the idea of someone saying you're going to shoot somebody. In America... It happens all the time.
It's a very good point. And there's an inherent belief that they have the right to do, the right to bear arms is a bit of a euphemism, isn't it? It's the right to firearms that they're really talking about. And I guess he'd also seen the success of some media outlets. So thinking of Alex Jones's show on, I think it was called InfoWars, and Steve Bannon's Breitbart was making progress, and he'd seen the racist lies that people were prepared to believe, not just believe, but passionately believe, and figured that he could have a bit of that.
In parts of the States, the idea of shooting a certain type of person still today is not shocking. And it's horrible and it's unfortunate.
And that's why,
but for so long, the idea of counterculture in America was leaning towards the rebel and the left.
Yes.
And now the idea of counterculture in America is leaning to the right-wingers.
It's like people in this country who claim they're anti-establishment while banking at Coots.
Yeah, there are so many bikers that support Trump. He's seen as a rebel, and he
just refuses to. He's just very bad-mannered and refuses to obey the basic standards of society, and some people relish that. And you've actually helped me understand something that had eluded me for a while, which is why would people believe the Sandy Hook hoax, the idea that Sandy Hook was a hoax? And the answer, of course, is that sometimes people get shot who they don't think deserve to get shot. And at that point, the people who fetishize gun ownership have to believe that it didn't actually happen. So that psychological, there's a jigsaw piece that I've just turned over, or Rebecca has just turned over for us. Because you sit here as a Brit, and you think of Alex Jones. I personally think two things. I think, first of all, how could anybody be so disgusting? And then how could anybody believe him? And if you want a third thing, you'd think, how could Nigel Farage agree to go on his show several times after he was telling the lies about Sandy Hook? Children being murdered, being a hoax. But it's about guns. And I guess Trump understood that implicitly. So Rebecca's analysis is clear. He can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue because his base will believe they deserved it. But when people who don't deserve to get shot, then someone like Alex Jones pops up to claim that they weren't really shot at all. And what I think was the first media interview that Trump did, either after announcing his candidature or even winning the election, I forget which, it was with the fella on InfoWars. Alan's in Manchester. Alan, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think, morning, James.
Hello,
I think
mate.
what Trump has tapped into is the globalization, where the steelworks in Pennsylvania, the coal works are all shut down, the car works around Detroit, and all these jobs went abroad. And basically, he's turned around to people who've been made unemployed, and and cities like Detroit have become ghost towns.
Yes.
And said, you vote for me, I'll make America great again.
A complete lie, but desperate to believe it, and then they might.
Well, we had James. We had the same with Brexit with Johnson and Farage,
yes,
backed by the right wing press. But what I'm saying to your producer, I'm an engineer by trade,
right,
and I've got a tool in my toolbox. It's called vice grips. Originally, they were made in a town, DeWitt, in Nebraska. And the story I read or got told, in that town of 15,000 people, half of them worked at that factory. The company got took over, they shut the factory, they moved all the production to China. So people just turn around and say, well, mainstream politics has failed me.
Yeah.
I've done my bit, I've worked hard, I've paid my taxes. And this is one thing that Trump has been able to tap into, and very much the way Johnson did. With his, this
sort of the good old days, bringing back even whether it was a real or a mythical rose-tinted view of the past. And then of course all the people you're talking about are sitting driving Japanese cars or watching television made in China and playing on iPhones that were made in China as well. But you don't need to be logical to rile people up, do you? In fact, less logical you are, the more.
I don't know if you know Manchester, James, but where City's ground is.
Yeah.
In the 80s, that was the workshop of Manchester. There was firms there, and it employed skilled labour, good jobs, and that went, with Thatcher's deindustrialisation, that went overnight. And, people do become disillusioned. They've done the right thing. They've turned up for work, and all of a sudden, I get that.
That's definitely part of the jigsaw, but it doesn't explain the Fifth Avenue angle, Alan, does it really? Unless you just buy into it so completely that you can't contemplate checking out ever.
But James, you just said something before, as a Brit.
Go on.
As someone who's British, I do not understand this fascination the Yanks have got with guns.
No, that is definitely a big part of it.
They scare me. The thought that in America, I could go down to my local supermarket, get me weekly shopping, fill up the car with petrol or gas, and then just go in and buy an AR-15 assault rifle with 200 rounds of ammunition.
Yes.
Just by showing me driving licence, I just don't get it.
No.
It's beyond me. And I think the thing is, no one has ever tackled the National Rifle Association.
No one's ever really
powerful.
tried, and that influences. They pick politicians, don't they, and arguably even pick presidents. I think you're right. I think the gun stuff is probably one of the reasons why British people fail to grasp elements of the story, but it's never going to explain all of it. I know. Thank you, Alan. I'm in Manchester on the 28th of November at the New Century Hall, which is a lovely venue. I'm looking forward to visiting. It's coming up to, or rather, it's just gone 11 o'clock. There's a few things around, actually. I don't know what's going to tickle your fancy most. There's a call for baby boomers to be taxed rather more heavily in order to ensure that younger generations cease being squeezed quite so hard by cost of living and sundry other financial pressures, which would bring us round to the energy price cap as well. But we might talk a bit more about politicians. I'll tell you more after this.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11 is the time. It's staying with politics, but very much back on this side of the Atlantic. There are a few stories around, and I'm almost certainly going to miss a couple as well. So here's one that you'll like. Golden goodbyes are being doubled for MPs who lose their seats at the next general election. Parliamentarians who are voted out or decide not to stand are in line for a £17,300 payoff, following a rule change brought in by IPSA. And IPSA is independent, so they look at this stuff with a form of objectivity, but you would have previously expected to receive £8,600 in those circumstances. That's story number one. Story number two involves Rishi Sunak once again breaking Parliament's conduct rules by failing to correctly declare his wife's shareholding in a childcare firm which would benefit from recently announced policies on childcare. It was inadvertent. It's a great defence, isn't it? He inadvertently failed to make the correct declaration because he wasn't sure whether he had to or not. I know I sound horribly naive sometimes, but if you're unsure about whether to make a declaration or not, then make it. right? So, I'm not sure if we should be making this declaration or not. Well, you're the Prime Minister, darling. I think you better make it just in case you're meant to. And then if you're not meant to and you do make it, there's no harm done. Well, there might be some harm done, darling, because it's a declaration about your shareholding in a firm that's going to make a ton of money out of the policy I've just announced regarding... All right, then don't declare it. I'm trying to imagine what conversation might have unfolded there. But I can tell you that it gets... I haven't actually really been through the mail yet today, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it got about 1/1,000,000th of the coverage of Keir Starmer's perfectly innocuous curry when they were desperately trying to save Boris Johnson's career. That's the British media for you. That's something we'll return to this hour because it's very relevant to the question that I'm leading you towards. So MPs are getting their payouts doubled. Prime Minister inadvertently failed to declare a shareholding that he was supposed to declare. I've got a story about more than 100 MPs receiving freebies worth about £180,000 in total over the course of this summer. Now, that's something that I would once have defended, but I think that I am in the process of changing my mind of that on that issue. And then I think there was one other story as well. Oh, Nadine Dorries, of course. Rishi Sunak could have his hand forced next month when the motion is tabled in the Commons that would give MPs the chance to vote in favour of her dismissal. It's quite bizarre, isn't it, that the people that we had particular issue with over the last few years have turned out to be exactly what we feared they were. I've been fooled by some of them, like Rishi Sunak. But your Jacob Rees-Mogg or your Donald Trump, your Boris Johnson or your Nadine Dorries, the ones that you might have described as the public enemies numbers 1, 2, 3 on this particular programme, have turned out to be, if anything, even worse than we feared. Dorries now is utterly beyond parody. The combination of ignorance and arrogance that you would need to be embarked upon the course that she is currently embarked upon is beyond articulation. You and I, not unlike the conversation we had in the last hour, you and I cannot get inside a mind that would contemplate, never mind actually do what she is currently in the middle of doing. Months now since she said she was resigning with immediate effect, in a massive huff because she didn't get the most ill-deserved peerage since Evgeny Lebedev's. And yet she still hasn't resigned. I mean, it makes a mockery of Parliament and democracy on a scale that would once have been shocking. But, in the post-Brexit Britain, it's not even the most egregious contempt of Parliament that we've seen in the last 6 months because Boris Johnson's still around. So there's 4 stories. Dorries just behaving, well, like Nadine Dorries, really. That's probably the most insulting way to describe it. You've got, and that's plenty of people on her own side now who are joining calls for her to do what she said she would do ages ago. The last MP to be ousted was Peter Baker in 1954, shortly after being jailed for 7 years for forgery. Tory. So you've got the payouts doubling, you've got the freebies, you've got the Prime Minister inadvertently failing to declare interests or his wife's interest in a firm that could benefit from government policy, and then you've got this story about more than 100 MPs enjoying free hospitality to concerts, sporting events, and the institutions giving away these tickets are banks, oil companies, the gambling industry, and media firms. So almost certainly this will include politicians being invited to events hosted by this company, by the company that I work for. I think it's important to get that out there. And I would once have thought that was absolutely fine. If I'm boogieing away at a big gig and there's Matt Hancock standing next to me doing a moonwalk or doing the robot, then, it might spoil my day slightly, but it seems perfectly reasonable for these people to be invited. 10 after 11, I'm not sure anymore. I don't see how you police this without saying you can't. You're a politician. You can't accept hospitality from anybody. But that's a small part of the conversation that I want to have. The conversation that I want to have is this. Why do we now hold politicians? Why do you personally now hold politicians in such low regard? I'm looking really at the payouts doubling for losing seats at the next general election, and I'm 60 to 70% confident that I would once have defended that. I am historically someone who believes MPs should be paid more money than they currently get. I see an MP's salary as something that should be viewed alongside the salaries of consultant doctors when they are sufficiently increased as a consequence of the current industrial action. Or I mean, that's part of the problem, actually, is that I might say head teacher, and then you'll tell me how much head teachers earn these days, and I'll go, crikey, no wonder they're on strike. But I just don't, I see that it should be, at least a six-figure salary to be a member of Parliament. It should be recognised by society as a role deserving of a significant reward. I used to think that. I think I still do. But there's something so tin-eared about IPSA's decision here to double the amount of money they get if they step down or lose their seats at the next election that I just worry it's going to add to this sense we've got of politicians being contemptible now. And I think it's really dangerous. I think it's really, really dangerous. I remember when Farage started talking a lot about the political class, and you thought, what's he on about? The man's desperate to be inside the Parliament, desperate to be inside. Well, he is now. He's got all his dreams have come true. The right-wing media treating his every burble and burp as if it were ex cathedra, and Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman dancing to his rancid tune. So the political class, what did he mean by the political class? He meant the corridors that he's excluded from on the grounds of his repellent views. But now his repellent views are mainstream Tory policy. He doesn't seem to have a problem with the political class anymore. So I wondered what he meant by that. And then I think of the curry. And I think of Diane Abbott's mojito on a train. And I think of that bloke who used to stand on St. Stephen's Green intoning, all politicians are liars, all politicians. And I think that the country is in a place that it wasn't in when I was younger. It wasn't in when I started doing this job. There is a sense that politicians are worse than ever. And the problem is that the ones that really are worse than ever, like 30p Leenock and what's his chops Gullis, and Dorries, these are the people most beloved of the British equivalent of Donald Trump supporters. So normal people, if you like, people who aren't seduced by promises to be even more cruel to refugees, or people who aren't seduced by claims that people who are poor are only poor because of their own fault. Why are we holding politicians in such low regard at the moment? 0345 6060 973. Because I don't think it's fair. There are obviously good politicians out there, and there are obviously good politicians in all parties. But the sense I have at the age of 51, the sense I have is that we as a population, and I could be wrong, in which case I'd actually quite welcome being wrong on this one, 0345 6060 973. But look back over the last 20 or 30 years. I remember when I was my dad was taking me to the theatre, and we met Dennis Healy, and he knew who my dad was because of his job as a journalist, and it was a really magical moment for me as a kid. Meeting, and I'd have felt the same about Sebastian Coe was a Tory MP, and Dad introduced me to him, and it just the idea that politicians had our respect in a way that I don't think they do now. Why? And I for the record, I don't think it's fair. I think it's really bad for democracy. My theory, and you're welcome to pick this apart, my theory is that the right-wing media, in order to protect their politicians during a period of unprecedented dishonesty and corruption, have had to pretend that politicians from the other side of politics are just as bad. That's how you end up with 14 front pages about Keir Starmer's curry, while Boris Johnson was urinating all over parliamentary tradition and political probity. That they have to pretend. That's why Diane Abbott's mojito on a train gets more coverage in the Daily Mail than Nadine Dorries' utter dereliction of duty. In fact, Nadine Dorries gets a column off the Daily Mail. Just stop and think about that for a minute. She get rewarded for being awful So they have to then portray, in that dreadful website, the Guy Fawkes website, exists almost entirely to pretend that left-wing politicians are as bad as right-wing politicians. So that's my theory. There's no one's infallible. There are crooks and fools on the Labour benches. Of course there are. But the Tories in their current guise, post-Brexit, are off the charts. And in order to keep the con alive, you've got to pretend that all politicians are as bad as each other. But that's just me. That's just my theory. You might truly believe they are. But why? Why do we currently hold politicians in a lower regard than ever before? And of course, one answer to this question is we don't, James. I don't. And I'd like to hear that as well. So I suppose I should rephrase the question ever so slightly. Do you? Do you hold politicians in lower regard than ever before? And then, if you do, why do you? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. And we might do a little side order on how reasonable would it be to tell every member of Parliament to stop accepting free hospitality? I don't know. What harm does it do? We might do a side order of that. Depends what sort of appetite you've got for the general question about, are we holding our politicians currently in a lower regard than you ever have before? And if you are, then why? It's 11:17. The number you need is, as ever, 0345 6060 973. Catchphrase time. Hit the numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 11. It leaches more than I appreciated into the first hour, doesn't it, this question about whether we're holding our own politicians in lower regard than ever before? Because what you have in the United Kingdom is an astonishing aligning of planets at the moment. You have some politicians, some very prominent and successful politicians who are objectively awful, right? So whether you're talking about Boris Johnson or Nadine Dorries or Jacob Rees-Mogg or 30p Leenock or Jonathan Gutt, you've got a real bunch of thugs and idiots, I suppose is the nicest way of putting it. But they are the ones most beloved of the right-wing media. So they are the ones being given the shows on these funny little new TV channels. They are the ones being given columns in the Daily Mail. They are the ones being feted. So you've got this appalling, distorting lens whereby some politicians are truly hideous. I mean, genuinely, historically hideous. But for reasons that we will explore together now, they are the ones that the right-wing media love. I mean, a large part of the explanation is you can't start telling the truth about these people because they're the reason why we got Brexit. If you start telling the truth about these people, then the truth about Brexit will follow. So you'd put Farage on the list as well. I think he's got a show on one of these new TV stations. So all of them are awful, truly awful people, and historically awful politicians, but they're the ones the right-wing media love. So what does the right-wing media have to do? Well, it has to ignore their awfulness or lie about their awfulness or reward their awfulness, but it also then has to portray the ones who aren't awful as awful. And that's how you end up in a country where the idea of MPs getting a pay rise or getting a generous payout if they lose their seat at the next general election can be portrayed as terrible and dangerous. Steve is in Villefranche-du-Queyrin in France.
Hello.
It's just outside Stoke-on-Trent, isn't it?
It's very close, James, actually, yeah.
What would you like to say?
What I'd like to say, I'd like to take your idea of MPs' pay a bit further.
Yes.
If we want decent MPs, then there's only one way to do it, in my view, which is to pay them a generous salary that makes it worthwhile becoming an MP, so that people who aren't necessarily able to fund themselves can actually stand as MPs on the basis that if they get the job, they'll be very well paid. But the corollary to that is this. No jobs outside Parliament. You do not take any commercial activity on at all. You're not allowed to. It's made illegal, punishable, by the way, by a jail term if you do. And the only exceptions would be made for those MPs who are working pro bono for charities or working in the public services. I'm thinking of Rosina Allen Khan.
Doing shifts on A&E. Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I don't want to pick into the detail of that too much because I don't think she does it pro bono for a start. But I don't think she does. But that you're coming from the starting point that the current generation of politicians is bad, is very, very bad.
Utterly unacceptable.
Why?
Why? Yeah,
why do you think that?
Well, I've been voting since I was 18 years old. I'm 69 years old now. I've never missed a vote either in an election or local election, national election, whatever. I've always voted, always been involved, always been interested. I think we've got people who lie habitually. I watched the BBC breakfast programme this morning, and I watched Naga Munchetty trying to extract an answer from a Tory MP about whether he thought the new energy cap represented an affordable option for everybody, and particularly people on benefits. He just didn't answer, and he lied, and then went on to talk about inflation numbers.
Yes.
Now, to me, I find that unacceptable. I find Lee Anderson's two statements,
yes.
The one about being able to make a day's food for 30 pence,
yes.
and the other one about what he wanted French people to do that rhymed with duck.
Yes, refugees to go back to France.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So my question there is, how is it? I can
but that
remember
you wouldn't prevent either of those by banning these people from having outside jobs, would you?
No, you wouldn't prevent it, but what you would be encouraging is a greater number of decent people who would be prepared to take the job on.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I'm trying to get to a point where we get people who are, want to be MPs to serve the public good. What we've got at the moment, frankly, is a bunch of incompetent, self-seeking careerists.
Well, you've only mentioned Tories. You've only mentioned Tories so far, which is your prerogative.
That may be my slip showing, James. I think.
That's fine. Well, I can't think of comparable examples from the other side of the house, but that may be because they haven't been in power for 13 years. Can you mention your age? Finally, Steve, can you pick a point where this decline began or when it's shifted? Is there a switch? Is there
yeah, I think there is a switch. I think the switch happened just post. During the course of the Gordon Brown administration,
yes.
Everybody else in the world recognises that Gordon Brown's conduct and management of a dire international financial crisis was fantastic.
Yeah.
Because of some idiot in the Labour Party leaving that ridiculous note about there being no money, the Tories have managed to blame that on what they call Labour profligacy, whereas in fact the most profligate government we've ever had in terms of incompetent and useless spending is the one we presently have since 2010.
That is music to my ears, actually, because I mean it, because I've this book I keep banging on about tries to unpick how Britain got broken, and it zones in on that specific example. Because they did it for years. They claimed for years that the 2008 international financial crisis was somehow a result of Gordon Brown's fiscal policies, when in fact he was in Paris and Alistair Darling was in Washington convincing the rest of the world to adopt their approach to saving the situation. And it succeeded. And yet this country dived headfirst into austerity because they believed David Cameron and George Osborne's lies about Gordon Brown.
I worked in education, James, for most of my career and in socioeconomically deprived areas. And the one thing I can tell you is the only time I ever saw effective money in education was during the Blair and Brown administration. It's the only time.
And you could see the results of it. And you could count the cash as well, count the benefits. Thank you, Steve. I mean that. So there's a few little theories I put forward in the book that are not genius or anything like that, but they're certainly not commonplace in the current media climate, and that is a big part of it. So that's why David Cameron gets a chapter of his own, you see. It's not one of the less obvious men who broke Britain. It's not like a Murdoch or a Farage, but that's exactly why. And reading into what actually happened that weekend, Angela Merkel didn't even want Brown to be there originally because we're not in the Euro. But he not only went to the Elysee, but won. He prevailed, persuaded Merkel and who was it? Not Macron. What's the other fella? Anyway, persuaded other European leaders. I think Berlusconi was there to follow the model of the British response to the crisis. 27 after 11. Thank you, Steve. Gino's in Chester. Gino, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Long-time listener.
Thank you, Gino.
Get that out of the way.
Welcome aboard.
So my parents keep on saying you should get on when there's a talk about Brexit, and I'm trying. But
well, we never talk about it anymore, Gino. We never talk about it.
No. I mean, so I don't know how I'll follow up what Steve just said, because I think that
strong, wasn't it? Very strong.
It was strong, and the thing for me, and I was saying to your producer, was one. It used to be, I remember in the 90s, that when an MP did something wrong, or there was a whiff of it, straight away they're removed from their post, or they resign. They had a moral sense of, I've done something bad here, I better leave. Or
Not always.
I
mean, sometimes they were kicking and screaming. So, you know, I'm thinking of David Mellor. I forget what it was that finally did for him, but there were certainly quite a few occasions when other MPs might have walked the plank and he didn't. But you're right. Generally speaking, there was a relationship between action and consequence.
Yeah, and it just seemed that leadership was stronger. It seemed that the people around the leader were also stronger to kind of toe a line, to basically say, no, we're not going to tolerate it.
Yes.
And what it feels like now is that the juveniles, I mean, I'm only, 40 myself.
Sure.
But I wouldn't dare say half of the things or behave in the way that these guys do most of the time. I look at that chap from Stoke, is it Gullis?
Yeah.
The way he was screaming and mouthing off when you're talking about 14-year-old children, 15-year-old children.
Yeah.
Now, that, I would never have seen that. And as I was saying to your producer, one of the things that strikes me is, and I say this now worrying about my re-entry back into Italy, but there has been this kind of thing where I noticed a lot in Italian politics. Somebody did anything wrong. Oh, nobody would resign. I mean, you've got ministers over there, ex-ministers, buying houses in Monaco and boats and doing all sorts of activity over the years. And not one would ever step down.
And we would have laughed once or called it a cacocracy or thought that we were somehow above that. And yet now we've got a Prime Minister accepting a loan of up to £800,000 in circumstances that can be best described as murky. I'll tell you who you've made me think of. It's not an example of corruption, but when you look back fondly on a more honest age, do you remember why Estelle Morris resigned as the Secretary of State for Education and Skills?
No. What was it?
This is going to blow your brains out, mate. She resigned as Secretary of State for Education because she did not feel that she was up to the job.
Oh, my word.
Feels like a different planet, right? Not a different age. It's like, could you imagine imagine Estelle Morris resigning as a former headmistress, I think, in a comprehensive school, certainly a teacher in a comprehensive school, felt she wasn't up to the job. And then you got Jacob Rees-Mogg accepting a job as business secretary and Nadine Dorries thinking she's absolutely qualified to be Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. That's a 20-year gap from Morris standing down because she didn't feel she was up to a job and professional incompetence, believing they were up to anything. Thank you, Gino. 11:31.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's an interesting one, isn't it? I think it's actually right that the conversation so far has reflected the state of the Tory party, but I'm more than happy to take calls from people who think that the malaise is broader than that. Because the problem is, of course, that among supporters of the Tory party, there probably is a belief that the Labour front bench or Labour politicians are just as dodgy or just as incompetent or just as dishonest. But you can't really sustain that argument with facts and evidence. It's why the Daily Mail had to pretend for 14 days straight that Keir Starmer having a curry was in some way comparable to Boris Johnson lying repeatedly to the House of Commons about all the parties that were held in Downing Street when the rest of us weren't even able to attend funerals or visit our parents. And imagine how twisted you have to be. And those, remember, historically, journalists are the ones that hold the government to account on behalf of the people. That's where the phrase fourth estate comes from. Look at the state of broken Britain and tell me who's holding this lot to account now. Not only do the worst failures end up getting rewarded by media organisations like the Daily Mail, and that's incredible, getting actually rewarded by them, but also people who are still supposed to be politicians are trousering large sums of money for doing propaganda on these completely biased stations. So, whether we want to outlaw all second jobs for politicians or not, you get a politician doing My Holiday cover here, or you get David Lammy doing his show at the weekend, you can ring them. You can ring them and tell them what's what. It's the radio equivalent of being able to march into a television studio and put forward your own case. I'm a lot more comfortable with that than there's one show on one of these channels that's presented by a husband and wife Tory team who interview other Tories. How do you create the image? And why would anyone put stations like that on air if they're losing tens of millions of pounds a year? Answer: to pollute public discourse, to create the idea in the minds of the handful of people watching that there is balance, that lot are as bad as that lot. But if you truly think they are, then I'd love to hear your arguments. Alan's in Worcester. Alan, what do you think?
Hi, Jeff. Nice to speak to you again.
Likewise.
I think the problem is broader. I think it's to do with the actual system.
Right.
I think person what.
You've got one of those glitchy lines, Alan. We'll try and sort it out. I don't know why. That's been happening quite a lot this week. Let's go to St Albans. Amanda is there. Amanda, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I haven't spoke to you before because, not because I don't like listening to your programme, because I do.
Don't be mean. Don't be mean, Amanda.
No, I'm not going to be mean at all. I love listening to you, but I feel that it gets really complicated and you're so up on everything to do with politics, and I'm not, but I am interested, and I'm, a woman of 54, I've been a teacher and all the rest of it, and I feel like this is more basic, that it's not about sides, it's not about, who you vote for. This is human traits. Your question was about if we hold them in low regard or not, and I do, and I think it's because of human traits. It's about kindness, respect, thoughtfulness, honesty, and it's not something that's just happened a one-off. This is years and years of politicians in all sides of the house, in personal life and in the political life, doing things that show that they're not trustworthy, that they don't care about certain groups of people.
Yes.
And I can't stand that. The person that stands opposite me, until they show me otherwise, I have kindness, thoughtfulness, whatever it might be.
Yes.
And they seem to have, the only person that I keep seeing that they care about is themselves or their family or, their group of people, whatever that group or tribe might look like. And, any job, this is a job. And I wouldn't go to a chiropodist I don't trust.
Yes.
Their job is for us, for talking for people.
When did it begin to change, do you think? Can you
I don't think it has changed. I remember.
So you think it's always been, because you were speaking as if there'd been a decline, but I've misunderstood.
I think there has been a decline, but I think that might be also because the world we live in is much more open and able to be seen. And when I was growing, so I'm 54, and when I was growing up, the way you saw the news was in the papers, or if you saw it with your own eyes, or if it was on the news. And now, I can see what's going on the other side of the world.
That's a good point. But are we being unfair then? Because what you describe really is humanity, albeit that,
I disagree.
that you...
Well, I disagree. I think there are, in all walks of life, people who are unkind and untrustworthy.
Yes.
But then they shouldn't be people who talk for other people, who have to make things work in the world that we live in.
So we've created a system in which these characteristics that should be negatives have actually become positives.
And that's not acceptable.
No, of course it's not.
I'm training to be an art psychotherapist.
Are you?
And I question myself, can I be kind and trustworthy for anybody who sits in front of me? That people I can't relate to because I haven't experienced the same as them, whether they're a male or whether they're from a different country to me, whatever it might be. Can I be for them at that moment, for that hour? And, I think it just comes down to, no, I don't have high regard for them because I don't trust them. Boris Johnson had an affair and lied to his wife. If you can, whatever...
Plural, affairs and wives.
Wives, but it doesn't matter what side of the house you are. They have a job to do, and I do think you're right that there are some great politicians.
Yes, good.
But this is a highly visible job, and sadly, just like the police, just like the nurses and the horrible news that's going on at the moment, the people who aren't doing good for their job, that's what's seen. But unfortunately, I think it's more the higher percentage of politicians are not to be trusted, and that's what we're voting for.
That's the choice we've got. You've reminded me of something else, actually, or rather, Julie's texted while you were speaking, and the two of you together have reminded me they denigrate the other as well, because what you're loosely describing is empathy, I think, the ability to walk a mile in another man's shoes, or to imagine what it's like to be hungry or a refugee or struggling to pay your bills. And they call that woke. They've turned it into an insult now. So, and then it's the same politicians, really, that demonstrate callousness.
So it makes me want to cry.
Yes, I can see why.
It's not about politics, is it? That what we're talking about
it's psychology.
Is not about politics. It's about how we treat other humans.
Yes.
I don't want to put people who have struggled to find life on a boat.
No.
I want...
Or at least not on a boat designed to be bleak. I mean, there might be some lovely boats out there that we'd be more than happy to see people accommodated on, but not one that Suella Braverman is boasting about how unpleasant it is and dreaming about deporting people to a country where refugees get shot. Do you not? I mean, you must see a difference between the Tory party and the Labour Party.
I knew you were going to ask me that. But I feel like that goes back to politics, and I think
fair enough. Fine.
If we kept it to being humane, that actually, wouldn't it be better if all sides of the House were able to talk to each other? There shouldn't be. One of your callers said a couple of calls ago, why are they screaming?
Yeah.
Why has this become theatrical? This is serious. We are living here. We want things to change. If I am in a school or working with children and young people, what they say to me when I was on Childline, what they say to me, young people talk sense. You know what they say? They say that no one listens to them.
Right.
And I think nobody's listening. Stop screaming. I wouldn't expect a 14-year-old to scream at me.
No, we've promoted sort of two-dimensional people into positions of enormous power, haven't we? Or one-dimensional.
And that makes me super sad.
Right. Listen, Amanda. I don't ever want to hear you on this programme again suggesting that you somehow feel that you're not qualified to contribute or capable of making a brilliant addition to the
I generally feel like that.
Well, you mustn't. Seriously, that's absolutely brilliant. That's a really new dimension as well that is really important to consider, because it's not just about what's happening on the political stage. It's about what's happening under the surface, isn't it? It's about the movements that are becoming popularised across the country.
Of course, because actually, if we could say that they were, yes, everybody makes mistakes.
Yes.
Absolutely, that is part of being human. But if the kindness is there and they say, I'm sorry, or if, when mistakes do happen, the politics will then be able to be spoken about and debated and worked out, because everybody is actually got their eye on the ball.
It's a baseline. You're describing a baseline. You're describing, right, you've got two teams or you've got 5 teams and they're all scrapping over the same ball. But everybody knows where the pitch begins and ends. Everybody knows what the rules are, and everybody knows what happens when the referee blows his whistle. And that bit's gone. That bit's gone. Michael wants to know, I mean, art therapy, the value of art therapy notwithstanding, he wants to know why you're not standing for election.
I'd love that.
Well,
I think there's too many men who think, sorry, James, and all the men out there.
No, that's fine.
There are too many men who believe what they say is right because they're male, and then they don't listen. And I think I'm not up for fighting that fight every single day.
Well, you wouldn't be on your own, and never say never.
Never say never. I think I'd rather continue working with young people who are coming up, who can rule the world in a better way than we have.
Can't say fairer than that. Can't say fairer than that. Amanda, thank you so much. That's made my day. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:48 is the time. Fantastic calls this hour. A lot of you picking up on that. Although Steve's suggestion that we should pay them more is being challenged by this text, saying the more we pay, the worse they become. I believe their pay should be linked to national pay. It's an interesting point. I don't know what the answer is, but I because I'm biased, I'm prejudiced, I think about what would the job need to look like to attract me. And that's probably a fairly stupid way of looking at things, but it's the only way I've got at the moment, and I would not contemplate going into politics if it involved a significant cut in income. I don't think many people would, and for good or for ill. That's I think the way many of us think, unless you're lucky enough to have a ton of money in the bank, but then they often end up being quite greedy people as well. Anyway, the question is not about that. The question is broadly about why politicians are currently held in such low regard. And I mean, I suppose we should have seen some of these answers coming. The appalling behaviour recently, mostly by Tories, mostly Brexit supporting Tories, because when you have got a lie of that size past the public, you can't go back. You can never go back. And so you look at all the worst examples of recent years, and you've got, I mean, they were all Brexiters, even the ones on the Labour bench who turned out to be appalling for the national interest were all Brexiters, whether they admitted it in public or not. It's weird that. 11:50 is the time. Talia's in Mousehole. Talia, what would you like to say?
Hi. Well, I just thought I'd ring in because that's my biggest trigger is when people say all politicians are the same.
Yes,
you're all the same. And I rang your show, and I think I told you in 2021, I think it was, that I was going to stand, and I am standing as an MP the next general election. But I think, and I stood as a councillor and got elected, so I've sort of sat to a level and can see, but it was precisely that you see. I think when people vote for parties, they're not looking at who they're electing. No. And I want to vote for a politician that I know what they believe in and I know what their values are. And whilst I know you're whipped in your party or whatever, you have. I will never, and I have never, as a councillor, when I make decisions, tolerance, compassion, fairness, equality, social justice. That's what leads me to my decisions, and I will. And it is hard sometimes, and you do get people writing in if they don't like decisions you've made. And I understand why politicians and MPs have a really tough time, because if they say anything, it can get edited, whatever else. But I can imagine. I wear my heart on my sleeve, so I'll probably not last very long at all. But you have to be so careful because people take things out of context, and then it's very difficult.
And actually that's quite a generous analysis, because quite a few of the complaints coming in by text are about refusals to answer questions and media training and excessive slickness, as opposed to dishonesty. Although it's a very thin line, isn't it, between evasion and deception? But because you can now be haunted for again, there's a massive imbalance between right wing and left wing politicians because of the massive bias towards the right wing in the media. But you can be haunted for days, so you have to be so careful about what you say.
Exactly, and I was writing my campaign leaflet last night, actually, and I put about apathy and a deep distrust, and this is what you have to change. And, we have to get a healthy democracy back, but the problem is people are using, and I think one of your first callers talked about Gordon Brown and things, and I think I saw it in the refugee crisis just before Brexit. I kept thinking it was Brexit that did it for me, and Boris Johnson actually made me stand. But actually, that refugee crisis, when you saw the awful division that was happening in our country and the lack of compassion and the arguments, and that's when the three-word slogan sort of started, and you saw that. Yeah. And, as soon as I started this, I just said, I'm not going to believe, definitely won't get world beating from me, I'll never say that, but you will get a two-word slogan, which is better politics or more aspirational politics.
That's nice. Are you affiliated to a party?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but yes, I am. But
there's no elections coming up, is there? So you can say. Yeah.
I'm a Liberal Democrat.
Okay.
I joined the party. I read all the manifestos, joined a party because of fairness and equality.
The level of engagement in politics that you describe makes me feel wistful.
But I think if we wake people up 10-15% more into politics, and people start listening and they ask questions of their politicians, and they really ask and find out what they believe in, and if they think it truly, then we'll elect the right people. But whilst we, as you say, would elect a sofa in certain constituencies, we haven't got much of a hope.
No, I'd say you'll have sown some seeds of hope in the minds of many people listening. Do you know why I love the name Talia?
No.
Because it's a grace and a muse. Did you know that?
I did. Yes.
I just think it's such a cool thing to be a grace and a muse.
Thank you.
Don't put that in your campaign leaflet. I don't know if it'll translate well across Cornwall, but it translates well with me. Thank you, Talia, and good luck. And that's a fantastic mission that you're embarked upon. 11:54 is the time. Neil's in Garrow. Do you know why I love the name Neil?
No,
I don't. I'm joking. Carry on, mate. What did you ring in to say?
I'd just like to say, James, at the moment, I think a lot of us, we have the moral high ground over the MPs because we don't deliberately lie. We don't deliberately go out and protect liars. And we actually live or try to live our lives at a better and higher standard than them. And so when we see them, especially on telly, trying to avoid answering the truth and just being vague with every answer, just don't listen and turn off, because you think if you were there, I'd have the courage of my convictions to say what I think.
Or even, I mean, you could even detach the moral dimension at the moment and just go for give a straight answer to a question. You could give an honest answer to a question. You see the evasion before you even get to the deceits. And you do, you're right. I think subconsciously you think, well, it's a bit of a cliche, but you usually think about what you teach children, don't you? And how you teach them to behave in certain circumstances. You tell them not to lie. And if they do lie, they get punished, or there are consequences, and you give a straight answer to a straight question. It's an absence of respect for things that we used to take for granted, Neil, I think.
Yeah, well, it comes, I've always been brought up in a working class environment, and we were always taught manners, respect, honesty, and you took that into your working life, and it was kind of person, you make a mistake in work and you go to your boss straight away, hands up, look, I've done this, it's caused this problem, but I think we can fix it this way. You get respect in work, even though you've made the mistake. Yes. It stops there. It's the end of it. And you've dealt with the problem. You've been honest. End of. When you do a Johnson, for instance, you kick the can down the road. Eventually, the can will come back.
But it's what moves into the road before the can comes back. So now because you mentioned working class values, and I recognise the ones that you describe, but the Tory party have got a deputy chairman now who boasts openly about campaigning on a platform of festering hatred and trying to turn people against refugees or so-called culture wars. And they tried to portray that as being the values that you allude to. So, I mean, everything gets corrupted ultimately, and it's a long time before the can comes back.
Perfect example of him, right?
Yeah.
What does he do? He puts up any MP who can't live off £100,000 shouldn't be in the job.
Yeah.
Months later, he gets offered a second job, £100,000 with a news channel, and he bites it hand off.
He's got a show as well. Everyone's got a show. I tell you what, if you were a rancid Member of Parliament who didn't have a programme on one of these new channels, you'd be calling your agent, wouldn't you? How low do you have to go not to get a show? Or maybe you could console yourself with the thought that it means I must have some intelligence and integrity, and that's why they haven't come calling yet. But no, I mean, they're looking for hypocrisy.
I don't think either of us will ever get a spot on her as a guest, do you?
Seems unlikely, mate, I think, to be honest with you. We'd have to fumigate the studio. It's 11:57. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Thank you, Neil. And I mean, he's a good example. It may be a little unfair to single him out when there's so many other contenders, but of utterly repellent politics, very much post-Farage, actually, although Farage obviously never managed to get himself elected. In the 2019 intake, that intake of Tories brought in flotsam and jetsam that, really in the previous era, any previous parliament would have stuck out like a sore thumb. But when there's 30-odd sore thumbs, they tend not to stick out so much. Elizabeth is in Haringey with the last word on this. Elizabeth, what would you like to say?
Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
I always listen to you. I'm an actual carer of my husband now. I'm about to retire. My pension is going to be crap by employers because they didn't want to make reasonable adjustments. I could lose my flat.
Oh, I'm sorry,
which is sad, and I might have to be rehoused.
Okay.
I've done everything right by the book. But if you look at Rishi Sunak, on theyworkforyou.com, you will find that he voted to cut welfare payments for people 99% that are genuinely ill.
Yes.
He didn't vote on equal marriage, i.e. gay marriage. He voted against paying people with illness over a longer...
He wasn't in Parliament for the equal marriage vote, I don't think, Elizabeth.
Well, this is how we voted on theyworkforyou.com.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas Keir Starmer is a bit more compassionate. He voted paying people for welfare over a longer period of time when they're ill.
Yes.
He voted also to have raised benefits in line with inflation.
Right.
Which is another good idea.
You'd think so.
Yes, but what really annoys me is they expect people like me. I may not even be able to get universal credit. I mean, my food bill's horrendous because my husband's a diabetic. Yeah. But what really, really does annoy me is they will get gold-plated pensions. And what really, really does irk me is, I mean, I live at the end of Hornsey Wood Green,
Yes.
they really irk me, is that they haven't got a policy. How are they going to help people like me, i.e. carers?
Yeah.
It's about time that they got off their butts and actually understand, because the majority of the carers are female, and we lose out when it comes to pension rights.
I tell you what, if every carer in the country went on strike, we'd know about it. But they rely upon the fact.
Then we'd get done for neglect.
Well, I know, but that's the thing that I guess they're banking on, and that's true of previous governments as well, not just this lot. It's almost as if it's out of sight, out of mind. But the pittance that you receive for being a full-time carer for a family member, in economic terms, crikey, saves the country millions. But I agree with you, Elizabeth. I really do. I'm sorry I can't be more help. It's coming up to 12 noon. You're taking me right up to the news as well. That's the only reason why I'm moving on. We're already running a little late. No one's going to be particularly surprised to learn that I've currently got no idea what we're going to talk about next. I quite like the... Have you seen what Priti Patel has done? This is genuinely staggering. It's funny, isn't it? We just listed all the awful politicians of the last few years and we somehow missed her off the list. I'm going to do a hook and tease. You're not going to believe what she's done now.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
Keith just said, don't forget the hook and tease, which I think it would be a breach with tradition if I didn't forget the hook and tease. But David had already reminded me, actually, because I ended the last part of the programme by saying, you're never going to believe what Priti Patel's done now. And David got in touch to say, written a children's book, adopted stranded puppies, donated her last year's wages to a food bank. I'm out of guesses, James, which tickled me pink during the news bulletin. No, she's intervened on behalf of Prince Andrew, with the palace asking one of the king's aides if they would reconsider, or could they consider the possibility of giving Prince Andrew, actually we said we'd stop calling him that, Andrew Windsor, his security detail back, estimated to cost up to £3 million a year. You'll remember he was stripped of police protection as part of his demotion, really, from public life after paying millions of pounds to settle a civil case with a woman who accused him of sexual assault. And Priti Patel, after a meeting with Prince Andrew's PR advisor, wrote to the palace asking whether or not a review of the Duke's protection could be something to consider. This is such a Tory apology. Are you ready for this? So here's a woman who has intervened with Buckingham Palace on behalf of a man who paid millions of pounds of his late mum's money to a woman who accused him of sex offences so that he didn't have to go to court. Precisely the kind of person that you'd expect Priti Patel to be coming into bat for, wouldn't you? So this is, and do you want to hear her apology? It's disappointing that this correspondence has been leaked into the public domain, and I apologise to His Majesty for the embarrassment and difficulties the publishing of this correspondence has caused. So there's nothing there about apologising for going into bat for a man widely believed to be undeserving of public support. 6 minutes after 12 is the time. So Priti Patel is not apologising for suggesting that your money should be spent on police protection for a man who spent millions of pounds of his family's money on getting himself out of a civil sex assault case. She's not apologising for inappropriate behaviour. She's not apologising for apparently doing the bidding of a PR guru. I don't believe that Andrew Windsor is her constituent, is he? So what's it got to do with her anyway? She's not apologising for inappropriate behaviour, inappropriate conduct, intervening on behalf of a deeply undeserving individual. She's not apologising for any of that. She's apologising because the publication of it, the leaking of her pathetic little email, might have embarrassed the king. Do you know, I've got to tell you something. David's been back in touch to say I was way off. She also donated last year's wages to a fed. Don't be stupid. There's a royal film out at the moment. If I tell you I watched a royal film last night, which was the most unexpectedly joyous film and brilliant as well. I mean, as a piece of film, it's superb. If I told you what it was, or rather, if I told you that I'd watched a royal film, fiction, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant, would you know what I was talking about? Have you seen it yet? What do you think? It's just absolutely superb. It's a love story. It's obviously about Harry and Meghan, but with a twist, which means that you can easily argue it's not about Harry and Meghan. It's groundbreaking. It's envelope pushing. And it is, simultaneously incredibly moving and incredibly funny. It's probably the film I have enjoyed watching most for months, albeit that because I've been working on the thing, I haven't been to the cinema much or tune. Do you know what I'm talking? I'm just going to leave it hanging. I'll tell you what it is before I go home today, I promise. Keith, do not let me forget this. I'm doing a recommendation for a film that is absolutely brilliant. It's about the royal family. That's the clue. And I'm just going to see whether or not it's gone widespread enough. It's got two very, very, very famous people in it. So it's not like some weird little niche movie, but I hadn't heard anything about it. It was my colleague Christopher Golds, actually, who works on LBC News, who posted about it on Facebook in such an effusive fashion. I was home on my own last night and I was flicking around for something to watch after the athletics, and I just thought, well, he's a pretty reliable lad. I'll see what he's got so excited about. So I put this film on, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Gorgeous. That's the word I was looking for. It is a gorgeous film, and I want you to watch it. You need to remind me to tell you. But I just want to see if anyone knows what it is. I want to see if anybody knows what it is. It is 9 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We've got a problem here. I think we're the only programme on the station that hasn't done this, aren't we? We haven't done this topic. Because I thought it was a bit of a no-brainer. Do you see the Spanish fellow who was grabbing his crotch throughout the World Cup final last weekend? Very odd behaviour. He's sort of, who's the famous crotch grabber? Who's the most? No, not Donald Trump. I mean your own crotch, where you do like the dancing. Who is it? Is it Tom? No, who is it? Who does the crotch? Why are you looking at me like that? Who does the crotch grabbing? There's one artiste is well known for crotch grabber. There's a famous. It was probably Michael Jackson. I'm thinking of, wasn't it? This has taken a turn for the worse, this introduction. So anyway, you saw the Spanish fella grab it, and then he grabbed a woman player. He grabbed a female player, the forward, Jenny Hermoso, isn't it? And kissed her on the lips. And I heard some brilliant phone-ins. Sheila did a particularly good one, as you would expect. But it was just so obvious. I mean, I just thought that, it's egregious. Guess what's just happened? This is not the biggest tension builder that I've ever inflicted upon you, given that it was just in the news bulletin that Thomas read. He's refusing to resign. So he grabbed a woman, he kissed her on the lips after Spain won the World Cup final, and he's just come out swinging. It is, not like that. I mean, swinging like punches. He's just come out swinging. And that's so rare. You never really get that anymore, do you? What you get is people who are accused of disgusting things and appalling behaviour, like another GBB's presenter, actually, just hoping it will all go away, staying very silent and hoping it will all go away. Or you get people doing the resignation and falling on their sword. You very, very rarely get someone who is banged to rights, I think, for inappropriate conduct, coming out swinging and insisting that he's done nothing wrong. He hasn't said that. He said, I was completely wrong, I have to admit it. That was on Monday. But he's now absolutely refusing to resign. He's coming out with an abject refusal to resign. He's not doing it. And I kind of find this absolutely staggering. He's the president of Spain's Football Federation. He has apologised, but then a few days later, I keep going to say come out swinging because it's the only phrase I can think of. The woman involved, Jenny Hermoso, has said, I did not like it, but what could I do? You've got a woman this is an astonishing story, a genuinely astonishing story. You've got a man kissing a woman on the lips in front of tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people watching on television. The woman has gone on the record as saying, I did not like it, but what did I do? And now he's refusing to resign. And what I think I like about this story, it's even got the acting Prime Minister involved, who's picked up on Mr. Rubiales' attempt to apologise after initially trying to insult his critics. The acting Prime Minister said it was a very unconvincing apology and he must continue taking further steps to be held accountable. Before the forced kiss, This is a Sky News report. He had grabbed his crotch in a lewd victory gesture from the section of dignitaries at the station, with Spain's Queen Letizia and the 16-year-old Princess Infanta Sofia standing nearby. It's such an astonishing story. And I want you to tell him, and indeed anybody else who was of the view that this was forgivable behaviour, what is so absolutely wrong with what he did. Now, I don't think I need much guidance on this. If I were to muster up a defence, it would be manufactured, but it would involve the very slim possibility of it being a tiny moment. And you go in to kiss someone on the cheek and you accidentally kiss them on the lips. We've all been there. But that isn't what happened here, because he's got her face clamped in his hands, hasn't he? And he kisses her on the lips, a full-on plant. Now, one other potential... look, we've got a sort of semi-rapist in Idiot's Corner today. Simon's texted in to say, shock horror, man kisses a girl, get over it. Well done, Simon. It's good to get it all out there, mate. Wear your disgusting misogynistic views on your sleeve. Idiot's Corner's a bit... It's not fair on the other people in Idiot's Corner to put Simon in there, so we'll put him in, I don't know, Rapist's Corner, shall we? You've got this Spanish fella coming out with absolutely astonishing justifications for his own behaviour. The only one that might carry is the sort of cultural equivalent. So when I'm in Greece, quite a lot of my male friends will kiss me hello. And obviously, if that was happening down the Dog and Duck, it would look very different from how it would look when I'm in Greece. But I don't think that's going to stick. So what I want you to try to do, and it might be one just for women this, I don't know whether we men, certainly not Simon, I don't know whether we men are going to have much to contribute to this conversation, but I want to hear a woman's explanation as to how this man could think that this was acceptable. Right? 0345 6060 973. And I don't mean in the moment. Well, actually, no, I do mean in the moment. But I mean now. I mean a week, almost a full week later, with the world's media almost united in condemnation of his behaviour, with the woman that he kissed describing it as something she did not like but could do nothing about. That is the definition of coercion. I did not like it, but what could I do? I want you to try to explain to me how he could possibly end up in a place where he is refusing to resign. 0345 6060 973. Because I tried. All right, as a bloke, I tried to come up with something that didn't cast him in the most negative light. This is why I didn't do it as a topic. If I was a woman, I would have done it as a topic. But I couldn't come up with anything. Because I can't conceive of what would be going on in the mind of somebody who... I can just about get the heat of the moment argument, right? Can you? But there's no earthly way. Imagine if we won an award. Well, forgive me. Imagine if we won another reward and I turned to Keith or Eleanor and kissed them on the lips. It'd be ridiculous. I mean, truly ridiculous. Inconceivable, right? Genuinely inconceivable. What would you do? As well, straight to HR, I imagine. But then imagine that I did it on television in front of several 100 million people. I've got the footage in front of me. I can't believe I kissed you on the lips. Oh, my God, I'm so mortified. I'm going to have to resign. And then you sort of think, well, maybe I'll get away with it. And you open up the newspapers the next day and it's full of people saying, you've got to resign, mate. You can't stay in the job. And you think, well, it'll blow over. And now it's a week later and you're doing a press conference. Everyone's expecting you to announce your resignation. And you literally come out and say, why should I resign? I just won the World Cup. I'm responsible for this victory. I'm not going to resign. I've overseen this massive victory. And that's the bit I don't get. Now, he might be a one-off, of course. But it seems quite unlikely to me. This seems to me to be, what would you call it, male privilege? Or toxic masculinity? I mean, the violation is one thing that could possibly be chalked up as exuberance, although I'm not buying that myself. You just do not go there. Ever. You don't even need to be told not to go there. It's not even a generational thing, although I think he's in his 30s. Might be actually the player's in her 30s. He's probably older. And then when you've got the whole world clamouring for your resignation, he is genuinely convinced that he's done nothing worthy of resignation. So I want you to tell me what you think he's thinking. Do you see what I mean? How does he get to a place where he thinks that this is A, acceptable behaviour, and then B, when the whole world has told him that it isn't, he almost single-handedly insists, or continues on insisting, that this is all absolutely fine. I've done nothing wrong. 0345 6060973. He's claimed it was consensual. She said she didn't like it. I mean, this is horrible to be unfolding in public, but I want you to try to explain to me what he is thinking now. Okay? I never set you easy tasks on this programme, but I want you to have a crack at that. 0345 6060973. I would have wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and told him to F off, says this texter, but then I'm 72. 12:19 is the time. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Listen, if you're a bloke and you're weird, do not ring me to tell me that this is all fine and it's all a big fuss about nothing. Seriously, put your tenpence away and go back to watching cartoons. It's 12:19.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 21 minutes after 12. I haven't pinned it down. I apologise. What is it that I want from you this hour? I think it needs a woman's insight into what a man is. I don't know how anybody could kiss a woman on the lips uninvited, be condemned for it by the entire world, and then essentially refuse to apologise or claim that they'd done nothing wrong, lie about it being consensual, and do all of this on the world stage. I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. And I guess I really, to get into the story, I guess I also just want to tell me what this story makes you think, what this whole bizarre saga tells you. What reaction does it prompt in you? I don't know what's going on, and I want you to tell me. So no low bars this hour. Cassandra is in Battersea. Cassandra, what made you pick up the phone?
What you're looking for is entitlement.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Of course it is.
It's the reason that young girls are told to cover up when there are men, relatives or non-relatives coming over to their house. It's the reason that whenever anything happens, the is pointed at the woman. When a man is over exuberant or over angry, it's not emotion because it's a man. There is a level of entitlement getting away with behaviour that is not acceptable because responsibility is put onto women, because women are, inverted commas, the emotional ones and men are not. He can get away with this being over exuberant, over excited, over emotional, because no one's going to point the finger at him, or no one has historically. Yeah, well, no one has historically, but my goodness me, he's got some fingers pointing at him now. He's got the Equalities Minister saying it's a form of sexual violence women suffer on a daily basis. And the lack of awareness. Not have a clue that this behaviour is unacceptable, and so many men don't.
That's the bit that I'm interested in. I'm not to the exclusion of any other insights, but how can he not be aware that this is unacceptable? I think is what I'm most confused by, and the answer to that isn't just entitlement, is it? There's a deafness involved, a fingers in ear, a refusal to sort of accept the bleeding obvious, really.
Comes with the entitlement that nothing is ever the male responsibility when it comes to this kind of sexual assault.
Yeah. So it's a medieval approach to women then, really.
What was the woman wearing?
A football kit, of course.
Were they shorts? How short were the shorts?
Oh, I see what you're doing now. I was being literal. Number 10, I think, actually, Cassandra. But yeah, so it is like the High Court judge mentioning the length of a skirt in a rape case or something like that. And, well, it's not quite, but it's part of the same societal problem. It's a different facet of the same problem. And then when the whole world,
because it's a kiss.
Yes, when the whole world unites to condemn him, and he comes out swinging, that's just uber entitlement, epic entitlement.
No, it's the number of men in power who really want to pick up the phone and call you to say it's nothing.
Well, I've got a woman, I think it's a woman here, saying, I can't believe you have such a problem with a kiss. He was taken up with the emotion. If a woman did it to a man, would you feel the same, asks Liz. The man has to resign. How ridiculous. He's Spanish. It's a different culture. I'm a woman. I wouldn't encourage it, but it happens. Violation is not the right word. It's just a mistake he's apologised for. From Liz, a strong woman, feminist and against abuse, but this is not abuse. It's just a mistake. What do you say to that?
Be an error. Still needs to apologise and take responsibility that the woman in question not happy with it.
No, I don't think you
and
can.
And the majority of women would not be happy with it.
I don't think anyone would. I mean, she's not happy with it. So you can't, no woman can be happy with something that she's not happy with. And she said, I didn't like it, but what could I do? That's awful. The story is utterly, utterly baffling. I remember Sheila coming in on the day that she talked about it, and it was the befuddlement that she communicated, actually, rather than the outrage. The outrage is there, but there's the utter befuddlement. What the heck? How? Thank you, Cassandra. Jessica's in Hammersmith. Jessica, what would you like to say?
Hi, thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Just hearing about it, it might not have even been a conscious bias that he had, but it feels like to me that it's sort of an endemic infantilization or objectification of women, where it's sort of thought, oh, well, I can kind of do what I want, or, kind of pat on the head, but way worse. You know what I mean?
Okay, yes.
Because it's like,
patronising.
Like a patronising
but it's
sort
got,
of
go on.
Yeah, to me it's like an infantilization. I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time in Spain. I'm a chartered accountant, and I often experience, especially, I don't know how old he is, but sort of older men sort of expect me to be, less intelligent or less capable than I actually am. And so I feel infantilized sometimes when I spend time there. I don't know if that's a kind of cultural thing. I don't know.
Well, we'll find out. There'll be plenty of people listening who can either endorse or furiously reject your analysis.
But there's a great book called Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez, which talks about how how society sort of set up against women because it's not really run by women.
It's a superb book, and Caroline has been one of my favourite guests on my Full Disclosure podcast as well, talking about that. So if people haven't got time to read the book, they can use the podcast as an entry level. And it's just little things, isn't it, Jessica? Like that, I think probably my favourite example is the crash test dummies, and the way that when they're working out how a human body is going to respond in a car crash, that all the crash test dummies are built to male dimensions, so it doesn't accommodate just all these little but big things. And then
I think it can kind of whittle away confidence as well.
Yes, of course.
And I would also ask, I don't know, would he have done it to the male captain? I'm not sure.
No. Well, I mean, what's bizarre, I kind of let go of the story because I just presumed it would be done and dusted by now. And yesterday, the news reports were he will definitely resign. And today he stood up in front of the press conference and said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not resigning. So that last bit of the story that's an extra dimension to what you've described. That's as if he's... And that's where the entitlement gets weaponized or turbocharged, when you just sort of think, oh, don't be stupid. It's because I think subconsciously, and this is Jessica's point, subconsciously he's thinking, well, it's just a woman. Why should I resign for kissing a woman? And oddly, Liz, who describes herself as a feminist, is on the same side as Luis Rubiales. I thought I'd imagined that. That's why I just got confused. I thought they'd announced his resignation, but they announced the press conference at which they said he was going to resign. I wonder if it's worth listening to in Spanish, despite the fact that many of us won't be able to understand it, just to see what the tone was like, just to see what the tone of delivery was like. And everybody in there, it's like something out of Ted Lasso, this. Everybody in the room must have just gone, where's Trent Crimm when you need him? Everybody in the room must have just gone, what is this? It's like April Fool's or something. Speaking of Ted Lasso, I will tell you, quite a few of you have enjoyed that film that I was raving about a moment ago, I'm delighted to say. But everyone's just writing in with the name. No one's revealing whether or not they share my absolutely euphoric review of it. That might be nice to know as well.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
32 minutes after 12 is the time. There is another story we're going to cover before home time, which is a new chapter in that remarkable saga of the £800,000 loan facility facilitated by a bloke who Boris Johnson then made chairman of the BBC, but none of them thought fit to tell the relevant authorities. There's another dimension to that which the Financial Times have unpicked. We'll hear from one of the journalists responsible for that shortly. 33 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we are, I think the word is reeling, really, from the refusal of the head of the Spanish FA to resign at a press conference called, and journalists were told, to announce his resignation after being filmed, if you like, kissing a Spanish footballer against her will, according to her, and sort of doing weird crotch-grabbing exercises during the actual game. We'll return to that shortly. Talk about light and shade this hour on the programme, or if you prefer, crunching gear changes. Jim Pickard is the Deputy Political Editor of the Financial Times and joins me now. Jim, we've been detailing this saga, as you have pointed out this morning on Twitter, following the sterling work of Harry York and Gabriel Pogrund at the Sunday Times. We've been following this saga from the start. We thought it was done and dusted. What's the new chapter?
So what our colleagues at the Sunday Times revealed back in January was the fact that Boris Johnson secured some kind of £800,000 loan. We don't know who from, but it was guaranteed by this guy, Sam Blythe, who's a Canadian businessman who's a distant relative of Johnson. And the thing that was weird about it was that it was done in secret. It was never published. And so the general public and the media had no idea that Boris Johnson basically had been helped out to quite a large degree with his personal finances by this guy. And you'll remember Richard Sharp, former chair of the BBC, got dragged into it because he'd been involved in some of these meetings, and he has subsequently quit. But there was always this loose thread, which Gabriel and Harry wrote in the Sunday Times, which was, why 4 weeks or 6 weeks after the initial meeting over this stuff, did this guy Sam Blythe appear on a list of 4 names given by the Foreign Office to the British Council as suggested candidates to be chief executive of this very prestigious organisation, Quango, a role worth £250,000 a year. And this loose thread just kind of hung there, and no one really has looked into it since. And the Sunday Times drew a blank on how these names appeared. Sam Blythe himself suggested, he said he didn't know how his name got there. He suggested maybe it was civil servants. What we have established after waiting 7 months for Freedom of Information requests to come back from the Foreign Office is that we've established that ministers were involved in the selection process or in the process of drawing up these names. Special advisors, Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, and in particular Nigel Adams, who was the minister responsible for the British Council. So he would probably say, well, of course he'd be involved because he was responsible for the organisation. And yet he was personally involved putting forward names. We don't 100% know that Sam Blythe was one of the names he put forward, but we have given him opportunities to deny that, and he hasn't taken them. The Foreign Office has denied the opportunity to deny it as well. And so I think we're a little closer to finding out what's going on, but the Labour Party is calling on the government to publish the full correspondence, to remove bazillion redactions, which are currently all over this stuff, and actually gets to the bottom of what happened, because we still don't really know.
Curiouser and curiouser, said Alice. We don't know who actually provided the loan either, do we? Because I think Blythe guaranteed it as far as we know, but who underwrote it? Or rather, who handed it over? There's a rumour that it could have been a private bank, it could have been Coop. I mean, on one level, that may not matter. No, of course.
What we have here is we have an individual who's doing the Prime Minister a massive favour with his personal finances, pops up as someone being suggested for this very plum job, which would very much have enhanced his reputation. And it could all be a coincidence, but at the moment we don't know it's a coincidence. And I think Rishi Sunak, if he really believes in all the stuff he said when he became Prime Minister about running an ethical government, might be persuaded to have a little look into what happened in the previous government.
Well, it is, isn't it? It's professionalism, accountability and integrity all day long, this. It's a nice little scoop as well, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Jim Pickard, Deputy Political Editor of the Financial Times, adding to the list of things that happened after I'd sent the final manuscript of my new book to the publishers. There's a couple of pages on this issue. Have a listen to this. It's got the translation on the top of it as well. But this is a press conference called, and journalists were told that he would be using it. Luis Rubiales, head of the Spanish FA, or Football Federation president, it would be resigning, would be announcing his resignation. And then this happened.
It was mutual, it was consented. But of course, I also need to say sorry for the context in which it happened. I'm not outside of this world, and I know that that was wrong. But do you think that's enough for me to suffer the way I'm suffering? The way they're chasing me? Do you really think this chasing and me being asked to quit is right? Is it right that I'm being made to leave when I have managed this better than anyone else? I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit.
So can we pause that on that bit there? There's a bloke there who looks like the half sibling in looks like the half sibling in Succession. The bloke in the middle. There are a few women in the front row, and none of them are clapping. And then the men have started. That's really interesting. There's one bloke really clapping furiously, almost certainly an incel. There is another dimension to the story. So, yeah, look, all the women in the front row. And some men, to be fair, not clapping. Oh, man, what a story. Emily's in Hackney. Emily, what made you pick up? You didn't know that bit, did you, about the applause? Or maybe you did.
So I did. That's why I phoned in. I saw the clip online. And I saw it on as women clapping. I mean, I can't believe he's not resigning.
Nor can I.
But I think the reason why he isn't is because this is the culture that he set up in that organisation of, he had the 15 players complain to him in that letter before the World Cup.
Yes.
He didn't really do anything about it. I've read the translation of what he said, and he's saying, he said for 5 years they have been after me with everything, complaints, lawsuits, requests for me to step down. So if he's been weathering kind of storms for 5 years, nothing's really happened to him, I think he just thinks, well, so what? And he's talking there, that bit you just played about the impact to him. He's not thinking how Jenny Hermoso feels being kissed on this world stage where, she's going to be celebrating getting her medal.
It's incredible, isn't it? And claiming it was consensual when she's said that she didn't like it, and he knows that she said that he didn't like it. The applause is bizarre. So that is the kind of men that I've forbidden from ringing into this programme, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a part of there's sort of in society like a sliding scale of sexual harassment that is normalised or accepted. So sort of in this country, catcalling, harassing people for their number, it's sort of, something that, it's not that bad. And he's sort of set the culture where he, in his mind, thinks this isn't that bad. And the people around him are supporting that. So he's surrounding himself with people that aren't challenging him on anything. It's just,
and he must have known that the reception he was going to receive. So it's a bizarre story. It's like a dual parallel universe where most of the watching world thought it was an open and shut case, and yet in his universe, or his echo chamber, or whatever you want to call it, in his ecosystem, he's done nothing wrong. He's done nothing wrong, and presumably these men are queuing up to tell him that he's done nothing wrong, and that's what's emboldened him to reverse ferret on the scheduled resignation.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think so.
Well, I got genuinely gobsmacked, and every time I think I'm as gobsmacked as I'm going to get, something else happens, and I end up even more gobsmacked than I was before. Emma in East Sheen describes it as classic DARVO, which is an acronym: deny everything and reverse victim and offender, which all of these people do. Trump does it a lot. He's the victim, really, of his own attempt to overthrow a democratically elected government. DARVO. He's a narcissist with entitlement. I mean, and also, what a nasty little postscript to the greatest day in the history of Spanish women's football. You've now got the conversation being dominated by the refusal of the Spanish Football Federation president to resign after he kissed someone who didn't want to be kissed on the lips. It would sound like I was making light of the topic if I said, when has that ever happened to you? But I wouldn't be making light of the topic. It would be an opportunity to explain why this is such a gross abuse, why this is such a gross violation. And quite a few of you picking up on that classic abuser behaviour. Now, utter denial, I'm the real victim here. And then they clap. I guess to women I must sound like such a flump. Oh, well, welcome to... Yeah, all right, James, woken up, have you now? This is what you've lived with for your entire lives. But for many men, even those of us with wonderful women in our lives, it took elements of the Me Too movement to fully appreciate how normalised utterly abnormal behaviour is within our societies. Ichaso is in Glasgow. Ichaso, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Oh, God. I'm absolutely fuming with all of this, I have to admit.
Is that a Spanish name? I think that's a Spanish name.
No, it's a Basque name.
Oh, it's a Basque. Oh, forgive me. But of course, yes. Crikey.
You pronounced it perfectly, by the way.
Well, thank you very much.
That's great. Yeah, there's a few things with this. I mean, you just to pick up on something that you just said there.
Yes.
You said that, he said echo chamber. Maybe in his echo chamber is huge.
Yes, of course.
It's massive. It's the whole of the football in Spain, because I'm still waiting for any of the professional footballers or any of the coaches in Spain to actually say anything about this.
Really?
That happens in front of the world.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, the politicians have piled in, but not the football establishment.
No,
I didn't know that.
Or the football fans. In fact, lots of the male football fans. You're on Twitter. You probably have seen it.
What?
It's absolutely outrageous because now he is the victim, and us females we are hunting him down. He called it a social murder.
It's incredible. I haven't seen it on. He called it out himself. Or?
Yes. He said that it was like a social murder. Now we are talking about a country where women are murdered.
I can't. I'm only laughing because you're saying murder in a Scottish accent, and everybody listening is thinking. Everybody's thinking a Taggart at this point in the conversation. I just have to point that out before somebody else does. So I mean, I guess this is what they mean by a culture war. Then, so this is simply a meeting of people who think that men can go up and kiss women whenever they want, and then the rest of the world who are pointing out, no, you really, really can't.
Yeah, and sadly, Spain has a massive issue with violence against women.
Well, I'm not surprised to learn that, given the applause, actually, because that's the point I missed. It's the applause, isn't it, that speaks of the atmosphere of impunity.
Yes, absolutely. So when people say, it might be a cultural thing, seriously, it's whitewashing the entire thing.
Yeah.
A cultural thing is giving a couple of kisses on the cheek when you're meeting someone in a social in a social setup. When you are the boss of that woman, who, by the way, they won, and now this has been stolen from them.
Yeah, on every level.
Oh my God! Yet again, James. Yet again.
Well, possibly you've just answered my final question, which is the conference today and the applause. I sense you probably were not surprised by.
I was not surprised in the slightest. No. It's really not, because he's like the last kind of. It's like his last. I don't know how to call it. This is someone as well that is obviously raging because he's been called to attention, because someone is saying that is unacceptable, and he's like a brat going, "What? You're going to take my privilege away from me? No, I'm a man."
Yes, I'm a man, and I'm the real victim here. I'm the victim of a social murder. Ichaso, thank you. I mean, it is just, there's a depression to these sort of stories, in the sense that what is so obvious to Ichaso and to everybody else that has rung in is so not obvious to the people defending him. It is truly breathtaking. 12:46 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
12:49 is the time, and I am going to remember to recommend that film, or to name that film that I recommended to you earlier. And a lot of you have both seen it and completely agree with my analysis of it as an absolute peach of a movie. Truly, truly lovely. It's called Red, White and Royal Blue, and it's on Amazon Prime, I think. It's on, and it is my recommendation for the weekend. I wonder if I should start recommending something every week. Well, I usually recommend a podcast, of course, but it's a little bit self-serving because it's my own full disclosure podcast, and I'm going to recommend one to you this weekend. Do you remember when this happened in the House of Commons?
Madam Deputy Speaker, poor people in our country have paid with their lives because the Prime Minister spent the last 18 months misleading this House and the country. Peter Stefanik from the CWU has over 27 million views on his online, and let me tell you some of them. He highlights that the Prime Minister said the economy has grown by 73%. It's just not true. Reinstated nurses' bursary, just not true. There wasn't an app working anywhere in the world, just isn't true. Tories invested 34 billion in the NHS, not true. The Prime Minister said we have severed the link between infection and serious disease and death. Not only is this not true, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it is dangerous, and it's dangerous to lie in the pandemic. And I'm disappointed that the Prime Minister has not come to the House to correct the record and to correct the fact that he has lied to this House and the country over and over again.
Dawn Butler there, just bringing the receipts to the House of Commons. I don't know if you remember what happened next. She got slung out. And she is the guest on this week's Full Disclosure. What's coming up next? The Full Disclosure bit or more from the House of Commons? So here's a little bit more from the House of Commons. Well, this is going well. No?
Let's play the clip again.
Should we do it all from the start? Okay. And so what happens in this clip, right, is you hear Dawn Butler in the House of Commons, and then you hear a little excerpt from this week's Full Disclosure interview with Dawn Butler. There you go.
Madam Deputy Speaker, poor people in our country have paid with their lives because the Prime Minister spent the last 18 months misleading this House and the country. Peter Stefanik from the CWU has over 27 million views on his online, and let me tell you some of them. He highlights that the Prime Minister said the economy has grown by 73%. It's just not true. Reinstated nurses' bursary, just not true. There wasn't an app working anywhere in the world, just isn't true. Tories invested 34 billion in the NHS, not true. The Prime Minister said we have severed the link between infection and serious disease and death. Not only is this not true, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it is dangerous, and it's dangerous to lie in the pandemic. And I'm disappointed that the Prime Minister has not come to the House to correct the record and to correct the fact that he has lied to this House and the country over and over again.
Order. I'm sure that the member will reflect on her words just then, perhaps correct the record.
Madam Deputy Speaker, what would you rather, a weakened leg or a severed leg? You know, at the end of the day, the Prime Minister has lied to this House time and time again. And it's funny that we get in trouble in this place for calling out the lie rather than the person lying.
Order. Can you please reflect on your words and withdraw your remarks?
Deputy Speaker, I've reflected on my words, and somebody needs to tell the truth in this House that the Prime Minister has lied.
Under the power given me by Standing Order number 43, I order the member to withdraw immediately from the House for the remainder of the day's sitting.
On the theme of justice, the probably particularly Dawn Butler's greatest hits. Then we've got the Boris Johnson moment, haven't we? Getting thrown out of the House of Commons. Yeah. I loved that. I think I spoke to you at the time. I think
you were the only radio.
Was I?
Yeah.
Well, again, it should have drawn rather because what I was struggling with at the time was the fact that you were so obviously right, which meant that Parliament was somehow wrong, and yet even people on your own side were, you're right about people not followed, just noticing that some people had kind of stepped back on social media, had unfollowed you, or just people thinking, I don't want to be adjacent to that sort of troublemaking. But it wasn't driven by a desire to make trouble or attract attention. There was a sort of frustrated howl that someone could lie so much and so obviously in Parliament and not have any mechanism, a bit like back in the office when HR, you complain about something and there's no actual
And it was
system.
Like,
the system is not up to the challenge of this egregious act.
That's right. The system was not built for, and our democracy isn't built for the weight of someone like Johnson,
or Trump. I mean, the American Constitution has the same problem, doesn't it?
That's right. He showed us all of the gaps, that everything that's wrong with our system. He showed us because he was allowed to lie with impunity. His ministers were allowed to lie, and there was, the ministerial code means nothing if the Prime Minister won't act on it. So it showed everything that was wrong with our democracy and our system. And I couldn't believe. So I'm like, hang on a minute. This is me talking to myself, like at home in my bedroom. Like, hang on a minute, Dawn. You're part of the system. You're part of that system. You're part of a system that's not working. So are you just going to pretend and just allow it to continue, or are you going to do something about it? And I thought, I need to do something about it. I just can't live with this anymore. I need to. And before then, that was the end of a very long road of probably 6 months of me moving all these different levers. Can we do this? Going to the clerks. Can we do this? Going to Keir. Can you put forward an opposition day debate? So if you name somebody in Parliament, so if we name saying we're going to have a debate on the Prime Minister's conduct, we could then call him a liar in Parliament and not get thrown out. But we would have to use one of our opposition day debates to make that happen. Never happened. No. Like 3 months later, I'm like, what's happening? Why aren't we not doing this? And in the end, I thought, what can I do? I cannot force people to take this seriously. What can I do? And then that's why I did it.
And people still didn't take it seriously.
Oh my God, yeah. Like in the beginning, they were coming for me.
Quite enthusiastically.
Yeah. And I just thought, am I going crazy?
This was real parallel universe stuff for a lot of people, I think, where you'd sit there thinking, this can't be right. But you'd then marched up to it and marched up to the issue and said, we're giving it a shake, and you became the problem.
Yeah. It's like, how... And I couldn't understand. I mean, obviously,
it's still mad, right?
My whole life,
it's still mad.
Oh, I don't know why people are not on the streets marching every day and protesting. I really don't. I think, can you not see what this government is doing? Total shock. But I couldn't believe that people were. Did I do it to embarrass the Deputy Speaker? What?
A Labour MP said that to you, I think. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like the conspiracy theories, when we got stopped in the car and was driving, and
people also accused you of lying about.
Yes, saying that I said the driver's black when the driver's really white.
Yeah.
Why would I say that? The conspiracy theories to me are off the scale, and because it's very hard for me to compute all of that, I'm just like, this is madness. Like, am I the only one going mad?
Am I the only one going mad? How many times have we said that on the programme together? Lovely interview that with a lovely woman, Dawn Butler, also now the author of a really rather splendid book called A Purposeful Life, which examines what it is that drives her to be the kind of politician who would prioritise principle over personal interest in that case. And imagine that vindication. So Boris Johnson essentially drummed out of Parliament for being a massive liar, and yet Parliament not equipped with a system that could accommodate the egregiousness of his conduct. How many times have we said that about Trump and Johnson, in that the system is not designed to deal with people so utterly contemptuous of the system, whether you're talking about the founding fathers or whether you're talking about our parliamentary standards. But there we are. So that's Full Disclosure with Dawn Butler, coming soon to a podcast. Well, no, it's already there, but you can get it. That's it from me for another week. We shall do it all again on Tuesday from 10. Keith, briefly, how often on Fridays do I say tomorrow? Have you not? Is it quite? Do I usually say to? Because you've given up by then, haven't you? You've nodded off. But if you did miss any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Play, where you can also, of course, rewind live radio. All LBC's shows are there, as well as the world's biggest podcasts with Dawn Butler, as you've heard on Full Disclosure this week. Rewind live radio on Global Player. Download for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4, Ben Kentish in for Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.